For 12 years, Lucas Reed watched every woman walk away, not because he couldn't love them, but because he already loved someone else. Someone who never knew. Someone who sat across from him right now, asking the one question that could destroy everything. Why don't you have a girlfriend, Lucas? His chest tightened. His hands trembled around his coffee cup. Because the answer was sitting 3 feet away, completely oblivious to the fact that she was the reason he'd been alone for over a decade. If you want to know how a single father's hidden love finally breaks free after years of silence, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The autumn wind carried the scent of dried leaves and distant rain as Lucas Reed climbed the narrow stairwell to Maya Collins' apartment. His work boots echoed against the concrete steps, each footfall marking the familiar rhythm of a journey he'd made hundreds of times over the years. In his left hand, he carried a 6-pack of her favorite craft beer, the kind with the owl on the label that she had discovered during a trip to Portland 3 years ago. In his right hand, a container of homemade pasta salad that his daughter Emma had insisted he bring. "Dad, you can't show up empty-handed," Emma had said earlier that evening, her 12-year-old wisdom far exceeding her years. "That's just rude." Lucas had smiled at her, marveling as he often did at how much she resembled her mother, the woman who had left them both when Emma was barely 6 months old. The same dark hair, the same determined set of the jaw. But Emma's eyes were all his, and so was her stubborn loyalty. "You're right," he'd told her. "What would I do without you?" Emma had rolled her eyes with the practiced expertise of a preteen. Probably show up with nothing and embarrass yourself. Again. Now, standing outside Maya's door on the 4th floor, Lucas allowed himself a moment to breathe. Thursday nights had become their thing, an unspoken tradition that had started years ago when Maya had moved into this building and Lucas had helped her carry boxes up these same stairs. Every week, without fail, they found their way to her small balcony, sharing drinks and conversation while the city hummed below them. It was the highlight of his week. It was also his private torment. He knocked twice, the familiar pattern they'd established long ago. The door swung open, and there she was. Maya Collins stood in the doorway wearing an oversized sweater that hung off one shoulder, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, no pretense, just Maya, exactly as she'd always been. Her smile spread across her face like sunrise breaking through clouds. "You're late," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Traffic." Lucas moved past her, catching the faint scent of her perfume, something floral and warm that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. "Plus, Emma insisted I bring food." Maya's eyes lit up at the container in his hand. "That girl is a genius. I've been living off cereal and broken dreams all week." "Rough week at work?" "Rough doesn't begin to cover it." Maya led him through her small apartment, past the cluttered coffee table and the stack of design magazines she never seemed to throw away. "My boss decided that our entire spring collection needs to be reimagined, from scratch, 3 months before launch." Lucas followed her to the balcony, their usual spot. 2 mismatched chairs sat facing the city skyline, a small table between them that held the remnants of countless conversations. He settled into his chair, the one with the worn cushion that had molded to his shape over the years, and watched as Maya dropped into hers. "That sounds insane," he said, cracking open 2 beers and handing her one. "It is insane." She took a long sip, her eyes closing briefly in appreciation. But apparently, insanity is just creative vision when you're a senior partner. They fell into their familiar rhythm, trading stories about their weeks like currency. Maya talked about demanding clients and impossible deadlines, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Lucas shared updates about his work at the construction site, about the foreman who couldn't read blueprints, about the new guy who'd nearly dropped a beam on his foot. But beneath the easy conversation, Lucas felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against his chest. He'd felt it for years, this constant, aching awareness of the woman beside him. The way the fading sunlight caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes. The way she laughed, throwing her head back with complete abandon. The way she looked at him like he was the most interesting person in the room, even when he was talking about concrete mixtures and building codes. He loved her, had loved her for as long as he could remember, and she had no idea. "So," Maya said, her voice pulling him back to the present. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, curious maybe, or searching. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "Since when do you ask permission?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Since I'm about to get personal." "When has that ever stopped you?" Maya was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the label on her beer bottle. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more careful. "Why don't you have a girlfriend, Lucas?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He'd heard it before, of course. From his mother, who worried about him being alone. From coworkers who tried to set him up with their sisters and cousins and neighbors. From Emma, who occasionally asked why he never went on dates like the other dads at her school. But hearing it from Maya, from the woman who was the answer to that very question, felt different, dangerous. Lucas forced a tired smile, hoping it looked more natural than it felt. "Who says I want one?" "Lucas." Maya's voice carried a gentle warning. "I'm serious." "So am I." She shook her head slowly, her ponytail swaying with the motion. "You're 34 years old. You're kind and funny and—" She gestured vaguely at him. "You look like that. You should have women lining up around the block." "Maybe I'm too busy," he said, the familiar excuse rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Between work and Emma, don't give me that." Maya leaned forward in her chair, her elbows resting on her knees. "Emma's 12 now. She's not a baby anymore. And I've seen you manage a construction crew, coach Little League, and make homemade pasta salad in the same week. You're not too busy." Lucas took a long drink from his beer, buying time. His heart was pounding so hard he was certain she must be able to hear it. "Maybe I just haven't met the right person. In 12 years, Maya's eyebrows rose. "Lucas, I've known you since we were kids. You've barely dated anyone since Amanda left." The mention of his ex, Emma's mother, sent a familiar twist of old pain through his chest. Amanda had been beautiful and wild and completely unprepared for motherhood. She'd stayed just long enough to give Emma a name and Lucas a lifetime of trust issues, then vanished into the sunset with a musician she'd met at a bar. "Dating is complicated," Lucas said carefully, "especially with a kid. Lots of single parents date. Lots of single parents aren't me." Maya studied him for a long moment, her gaze probing in a way that made him want to look away, but he held her eyes, even as everything inside him screamed to retreat. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. Lucas set his beer down on the table between them, using the motion to break eye contact. "It means that when you're a single father, relationships come with complications. Any woman I date has to be okay with the fact that Emma comes first. Always. No exceptions. And most people say they understand that, but when it actually comes down to it, what?" He shrugged, a gesture that felt too casual for the weight of the conversation. "They realize they don't want to play second fiddle to a kid that isn't theirs. And honestly, I don't blame them. It's a lot to ask." Maya was quiet, processing his words. Lucas watched her from the corner of his eye, noting the slight furrow between her brows. The way she was biting her lower lip the way she always did when she was thinking hard about something. "Is that really the only reason?" she asked finally. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Maya paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I've seen you with women, Lucas, at parties, at work events. They flirt with you and you're polite, but you never engage. It's like there's this wall around you that nobody can get through. Maybe I just have high standards. Or maybe there's something else going on." She tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive eyes that had always seen too much. Someone else. The world seemed to narrow down to this moment, this balcony, this conversation, this woman who was asking him to reveal the secret he'd kept buried for over a decade. Lucas could feel the truth pushing against his lips, demanding release. It would be so easy to say it, to finally let go of the burden he'd been carrying alone for so long. But what would happen then? What would happen to their friendship, to these Thursday nights, to the easy comfort of having her in his life without the complications of romantic expectation? What would happen when she realized that she'd been the reason for his loneliness and had to carry that weight whether she wanted to or not? "There's no one else," Lucas said, and the lie tasted like ash on his tongue. Maya held his gaze for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. Then she leaned back in her chair, and the tension broke like a wave receding from the shore. "If you say so," she murmured. They sat in silence as the sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Lucas could feel the echo of the question hanging between them, a ghost of a conversation that had touched too close to the truth. He should go, should make some excuse about early mornings and construction deadlines, retreat to the safety of his own apartment where he could wrestle with his feelings in private. But leaving Maya's presence felt impossible, even now. Especially now. "Speaking of changes," Maya said eventually, her voice carrying a strange note that Lucas couldn't quite identify. "I have something to tell you." He turned to look at her, noting the way her fingers had tightened around her beer bottle. "What's going on?" Maya took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the distant skyline. "I got a job offer." "That's great." Lucas felt a smile forming. "The Hendricks account? I know you've been working hard to land that." "Not the Hendricks account." She finally met his eyes, and what he saw there made his stomach drop. "A different job, at a different company. In Seattle." The word hit him like a punch to the chest. Seattle. 2,000 miles away from everything he knew. 2,000 miles away from Thursday nights on this balcony. 2,000 miles away from him. "Seattle," he repeated, his voice sounding strange and distant in his own ears. Maya nodded, her expression caught somewhere between excitement and anxiety. "It's a senior design director position at Morrison & Blake. The salary is almost double what I'm making now, and the creative freedom is exactly what I've been looking for." She paused, worrying her lower lip again. "It's basically my dream job, Lucas." He should say something, should tell her how happy he was for her, how proud, how certain she was going to crush it. That's what a good friend would do. That's what the best friend she believed him to be would do. But all Lucas could feel was the ground crumbling beneath his feet. "When did this happen?" he managed. "They reached out a few weeks ago. I've been going through the interview process, and they made the official offer yesterday." Maya set her beer down and turned to face him fully, pulling her legs up onto the chair. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." "A few weeks?" Lucas heard the edge in his own voice and tried to soften it. "You've been talking to them for weeks and you didn't mention it?" "I didn't want to say anything until I knew for sure, and honestly." She broke off, something vulnerable crossing her face. "I wasn't sure how to bring it up." "Why would it be hard to bring up? This is amazing news, Maya. This is everything you've been working toward." The words were right, supportive, encouraging, exactly what he should be saying, but they felt hollow in his mouth, and from the way Maya was looking at him, she could hear the emptiness behind them. "Is it?" she asked softly. "Amazing?" Lucas forced himself to meet her eyes. "Of course it is. Morrison & Blake is one of the top firms in the country. You'd be crazy not to take it." "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Lucas could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One word, one honest confession, and everything would change. But he couldn't do that to her, couldn't make her feel guilty for chasing her dreams, couldn't burden her with the weight of his unrequited feelings. "When do you start?" he asked instead. Something flickered in Maya's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. 2 months. They want me there by December. 2 months. 8 Thursday nights. 60 days of borrowed time before the woman he loved disappeared from his daily life. "That's soon," Lucas said, his voice carefully neutral. "I know." Maya pulled her sweater tighter around herself, though the evening wasn't particularly cold. "There's a lot to do before then. Finding an apartment, packing up, tying up loose ends at work." She trailed off, her eyes searching his face. "I'm going to need help. With the move, I mean. If you're willing." Lucas looked at her, at this woman who had been the axis around which his heart had rotated for as long as he could remember, and felt something shift in his chest. A resolve, maybe. Or a surrender. "Of course," he said. "Whatever you need." Maya's smile was grateful, but tinged with something else. Something Lucas couldn't quite name. "Thank you." I don't think I could do this without you. You could, he thought. You've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for. But he didn't say it. Instead, he picked up his beer and raised it in her direction. To Seattle, then, and to crushing it at Morrison and Blake. Maya lifted her own bottle, her eyes never leaving his. To new beginnings. They clinked their bottles together, and Lucas drank deeply, letting the bitter taste wash over his tongue. Across from him, Maya did the same, and for a moment they were just two friends sharing a drink on a balcony, the same as they'd done hundreds of times before. But everything had changed, and Lucas had the terrible feeling that once she left, nothing would ever be the same again. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of cardboard boxes and packing tape. True to his word, Lucas showed up at Maya's apartment every free moment he had, helping her sort through years of accumulated belongings and decide what would make the journey to Seattle. It was torture. Every item they packed felt like another piece of his stability being sealed away. The vintage record player she'd inherited from her grandmother. The collection of snow globes from cities they'd talked about visiting together someday. The worn blanket they'd shared during countless movie nights, its fabric soft from years of use. Do you remember this? Maya held up a photograph, its edges slightly faded. Lucas leaned in to look and felt his heart constrict. The picture showed the two of them at Maya's college graduation nearly 12 years ago. She was wearing her cap and gown, diploma clutched triumphantly in one hand. Lucas stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, grinning like he'd won the lottery. He remembered that day with painful clarity. Emma had been barely a month old, tiny and perfect, and terrifying in her complete dependence on him. Amanda had already started pulling away, staying out later, finding excuses to be anywhere but home with their baby. But Lucas had driven 4 hours to watch Maya graduate, Emma strapped securely in her car seat in the back. He'd sat in the audience, his newborn daughter sleeping against his chest, and watched the woman he loved walk across the stage to accept her diploma. It was the same day he'd realized that his feelings for Maya weren't going away, that they never would. I remember, he said quietly. Maya traced her finger over the image, her expression soft. You drove all that way with a newborn. I still can't believe you did that. You asked me to come. I asked a lot of people to come. You were the only one who actually showed up. She looked up at him, something intense in her gaze. You've always shown up, Lucas. Every time I've needed you. He didn't know what to say to that, so he did what he always did when the conversation veered too close to dangerous territory. He deflected. Someone had to make sure you didn't trip going up those stairs in those heels, he said lightly. Maya laughed, but it didn't quite chase the shadow from her eyes. You and your practical concerns. She placed the photograph carefully in a box marked Keep, and Lucas tried not to think about the fact that it would soon be sitting in an apartment he'd never see, in a city he'd never visit. Hey, Dad! Emma's voice rang out from the doorway, and Lucas turned to see his daughter balancing a stack of pizza boxes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail identical to Maya's, and there was a streak of what looked like motor oil on her cheek, probably from the robotics project she'd been working on at school. Delivery's here, Emma announced, and I used the tip money to get garlic knots. You're welcome. Maya crossed the room to take the boxes from her, pressing a kiss to Emma's forehead in the process. You are a lifesaver. I was about to gnaw on cardboard. Gross. But Emma was grinning, basking in the attention the way she always did around Maya. It had been that way since Emma was small. She'd gravitated toward Maya like a flower turning toward the sun, finding in her something that Lucas couldn't provide. A mother figure, maybe. Or just a woman who looked at her like she mattered. How was school? Lucas asked, falling into the familiar parental script. Emma shrugged, already reaching for a slice of pizza. Fine. Mr. Patterson says my robot is showing promise, which I'm pretty sure is teacher code for not a complete disaster. From Mr. Patterson, that's basically a standing ovation, Maya said. She'd heard enough stories about Emma's demanding robotics teacher to know the man's exacting standards. What about the competition next month? Still feeling good about it? Emma's face lit up with the enthusiasm she usually tried to hide behind teenage indifference. The calibrations are finally stable. I think we might actually have a shot at making regionals. That's my girl. Lucas felt a swell of pride in his chest. for her intelligence, her determination, the way she threw herself completely into things she cared about. She was so much better than he'd ever been at her age. Better than he was now, probably. They ate pizza sitting cross-legged on Maya's living room floor, surrounded by towers of boxes and the debris of a life being dismantled. Emma dominated the conversation, chattering about her project and her friends and the new song she was learning on guitar, and Lucas let her voice wash over him like familiar music. This is what he would miss most, he realized. Not just Maya, but the three of them together. This unlikely family they'd somehow built over the years. Thursday nights and Sunday brunches and impromptu pizza dinners amid moving boxes. It had never been official, never been acknowledged, but it had been his, and in 2 months it would be gone. Dad? You okay? Lucas blinked, realizing that Emma was watching him with concern. Maya's attention had turned to him too, and he suddenly felt exposed under their combined scrutiny. Fine, he said automatically. Just tired. Emma's eyes narrowed. She had inherited his inability to accept easy explanations, but she didn't push. Instead, she reached for another slice of pizza and turned her attention back to Maya. So, Seattle, she said, her voice deliberately casual. That's pretty far. It is. Maya's response was soft, careful. But there are planes and video calls. It's not like I'm moving to the moon. Still, Emma picked at her pizza crust, not meeting anyone's eyes. It won't be the same. The truth of that statement hung in the air, undeniable and heavy. Lucas watched his daughter struggle with emotions she probably couldn't even name, and felt his heart crack along familiar fault lines. No, Maya agreed quietly. It won't be the same. They finished their meal in subdued silence, the earlier lightness gone. When Emma excused herself to the bathroom, Maya moved closer to Lucas, her shoulder brushing against his in the cramped space between boxes. She's taking this hard, she murmured. She's not the only one. The words slipped out before Lucas could stop them. He felt Maya go still beside him, felt the weight of her attention shifting to study his profile. Lucas? I know. He forced a smile that felt brittle on his face. We'll adjust. We always do. But even as he said it, Lucas knew it was a lie. There would be no adjusting to Maya's absence. There would only be enduring it, getting through each day without her, learning to live with the constant ache of missing someone who was still alive, still out there, just too far away to reach. Maya's hand found his in the space between them, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that was both familiar and devastating. I'm going to miss you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas closed his eyes, letting himself feel the warmth of her touch, committing it to memory. I'm going to miss you too. They stayed like that until Emma returned, their hands separating as naturally as they'd come together. But Lucas could still feel the ghost of Maya's fingers against his skin, and he knew that sensation would haunt him for far longer than 2,000 miles could explain. As the weeks passed, Lucas found himself cataloging everything about Maya with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The way she laughed when something genuinely surprised her, a full-body thing that made her shoulders shake. The way she squinted at small text, too vain to admit she might need reading glasses. The way she said his name, stretching the first syllable like she was savoring it. He was storing up memories for the famine to come. Emma, for her part, had become Maya's shadow. She found excuses to come over every day after school, helping with packing or homework or nothing at all. She showed Maya her robotics designs and her guitar progress and the secret notebook where she wrote poetry she wouldn't let anyone else see. Lucas watched their growing closeness with a complicated mix of joy and heartbreak. His daughter was storing up her own memories, building a reserve of connection that would have to sustain her through the separation. They never talked about it directly, but every night when Lucas tucked Emma into bed, a ritual she pretended to have outgrown but secretly still loved. He could see the question in her eyes. Why does everyone leave? It was the same question Amanda had planted there 12 years ago, watered by absence and blooming into a garden of insecurity that Lucas had spent his whole life trying to uproot. She's not leaving because of us, he told Emma one night, sitting on the edge of her bed in the darkness. You know that, right? Emma was quiet for a moment. I know. She loves you. That's not going to change just because she's in a different city. I know, Dad. Emma's voice was small, younger than her 12 years. It's just, what if she forgets? What if she makes new friends and gets busy and just stops? Lucas felt his throat tighten. It was the same fear that kept him awake at night, staring at his ceiling and trying not to imagine a future where Maya's Thursday nights were filled with other people, other conversations, other lives that didn't include him. Then we show up, he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. We call and we visit, and we remind her that she belongs to us too. That's what family does. Emma was silent, processing. Then, is Maya family? The question hung in the darkness, simple and devastating. Lucas thought about all the years of Thursday nights and shared meals and inside jokes. He thought about Maya at Emma's first day of school, at her dance recitals, at her bedside when she'd had her appendix out at age 7. He thought about the way his daughter looked at Maya, with the kind of trust and love that couldn't be manufactured or explained. Yes, he said finally, she's family. Emma's hand found his in the darkness, small and warm. Then we won't let her forget. Lucas squeezed her fingers gently, his heart full of pride and pain in equal measure. No, we won't. 3 weeks before Maya's scheduled departure, Lucas arrived at her apartment to find her sitting on the balcony, her knees pulled up to her chest and her eyes red-rimmed. Hey! He crossed to her quickly, his heart rate spiking with concern. What's wrong? Maya looked up at him, and something in her expression made him stop short. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was something more complex, more desperate. I need to ask you something, she said, her voice hoarse. Lucas lowered himself into his usual chair, trying to steady his breathing. Okay. And I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. Can you do that? His stomach clenched with premonition. Maya, promise me. Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. Promise me you'll tell me the truth. Lucas hesitated. He'd spent 12 years building walls around his feelings, constructing elaborate defenses to keep the truth hidden. Now Maya was asking him to tear them down, and he wasn't sure he could survive what lay on the other side, but he'd never been able to deny her anything. I promise, he said. Maya took a shaky breath. Earlier tonight, I had drinks with some of the girls from work, a going-away thing, and they were all asking about my love life, about whether I was dating anyone, about what I was going to do in Seattle. She paused, her fingers twisting together in her lap. And I realized that I've been telling myself the same lie for years. What lie? That I'm single because I'm focused on my career, that relationships take time and energy that I don't have, that the right person just hasn't come along yet. She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. It's all bullshit, Lucas. He sat very still, afraid that any movement might shatter the moment. Maya, I don't understand. I've been waiting, she cut him off. For 12 years I've been waiting for something that I was too scared to reach for. And now I'm about to move across the country and I need to know, her voice cracked. I need to know if I've been waiting for nothing. Lucas's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear his own thoughts. What are you saying? Maya stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the balcony. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she stared out at the skyline, and Lucas had never seen her look more beautiful or more vulnerable. Every time I try to date someone, she said, her back to him, I compare them to you. Every time someone asks me what I'm looking for in a partner, I describe you. Every time I imagine what my future looks like, you're in it. She turned to face him, and there were tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm in love with you, Lucas. I've been in love with you for as long as I can remember. And I need to know if there's any chance at all, that you feel the same way. The world went very quiet. Lucas could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of traffic, the whisper of wind across the balcony. He could see Maya standing before him, laid bare and waiting, offering up her heart with both hands. Everything he'd wanted for 12 years was right there in front of him. All he had to do was reach out and take it, but the words stuck in his throat, caught behind years of carefully constructed walls and the crushing weight of his own fear. Maya, he said, and his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. And that was when the phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Maya flinched, her hand going automatically to her pocket. Sorry, let me just... She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted. It's my mom. I should... Take it. Lucas stood, grateful for the reprieve and hating himself for the gratitude. It might be important. Maya answered the phone, and Lucas retreated to the kitchen, putting distance between himself and the conversation that had just changed everything. His hands were shaking as he gripped the counter. Maya loved him. She loved him. After all these years of wondering and wanting and trying to convince himself that he'd misread every signal, she just stood in front of him and said the words. And he'd frozen. He could hear her voice from the balcony, the concerned tone that meant her mother was sharing something serious. A few minutes later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, her phone still clutched in her hand. My aunt is in the hospital, she said. My mom needs me to fly out tonight. Of course. Lucas straightened, slipping automatically into caretaker mode. What do you need? I can drive you to the airport, help you pack. Lucas. Maya's voice was firm, cutting through his bustling. We need to finish this conversation. He forced himself to meet her eyes. We will, but right now, your family needs you. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something he wasn't sure he was ready to show. Then she nodded slowly. When I get back, she said. It wasn't a question. When you get back, Lucas agreed. An hour later, he watched her disappear through airport security, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder, and her unanswered confession hanging between them like a live wire. She loved him, and he loved her, and in a few weeks she would be gone. Standing in the harsh fluorescent light of the airport terminal, Lucas Reed finally understood that his silence had been the cruelest cowardice of all. Mama Singh. Maya was gone for 5 days. Her aunt's condition stabilized, but the family drama that emerged in the hospital waiting room kept her on the other side of the country, managing conflicts and emotions that weren't his to share. They texted occasionally, brief check-ins that skirted around the massive, unaddressed elephant in the room. Lucas threw himself into work, into Emma's robotics competition prep, into anything that would keep his mind off the reckoning that awaited him. But at night, alone in his apartment with only the sound of his daughter sleeping down the hall, he couldn't escape it. Maya loved him. The knowledge burned through him like a fever, reshaping everything he thought he knew about his life. All those years of watching her date other men, convincing himself that she saw him as nothing more than a friend. Had she been waiting too? Had she been as trapped by fear as he was? And if she had, what did that say about the time they'd wasted? Lucas thought about Emma, about the years he'd spent putting his own wants aside to focus on being a good father. He told himself it was noble, a sacrifice born of love and responsibility. But now, looking back, he wondered if it had also been convenient, a built-in excuse to avoid the terrifying vulnerability of reaching for what he truly wanted. His daughter had never asked him to be alone. She'd never demanded that he close himself off from love. If anything, she'd watched his careful isolation with the same quiet sadness she showed when talking about her own mother. What kind of example had he been setting? That love was something to be feared? That wanting something for yourself was somehow selfish? Emma deserved better than that. And maybe, Lucas deserved better too. When Maya's text came saying she was back in town, Lucas made a decision. No more hiding, no more walls, no more wasted time. He was going to tell her the truth. Lucas stood outside Maya's door on a Sunday afternoon, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say a dozen times, but the words had scattered like leaves in a windstorm the moment he'd walked up those familiar stairs. She opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been waiting for him. Her face was tired, marked by the strain of the past week, but there was something determined in her eyes. "Come in," she said. He followed her to the living room, now half empty with boxes stacked against every wall. The balcony doors were open, letting in the autumn air and the sound of the city below. Maya turned to face him, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Before you say anything, I need you to know that I don't regret what I told you. Even if you don't feel the same way, I needed to say it. I couldn't leave without you knowing." "Maya, Tish, please." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Let me finish. I've spent the last week thinking about this, and I realized something. I've been waiting for you to make the first move for 12 years, waiting for a sign that it was safe to feel what I feel. And that's not fair, not to you and not to me. She took a shaky breath. So I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm going to tell you that I love you, and then I'm going to get on a plane and start my new life. And if you want to be part of that life, you know where to find me. Her words hit him like a wave, overwhelming in their honesty. Lucas felt something crack open inside him, the last remnant of the wall he'd built so carefully over the years. Maya, he said again, and this time his voice was steady. Shut up. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I said shut up. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just inches away from her. Because if you keep talking, I'm never going to get the chance to tell you that I've been in love with you since we were 16 years old. Maya went very still. I've been in love with you through every girlfriend you've had and every guy you've brought to meet me, through your graduation and your first job and every promotion since, through the birth of my daughter and her first steps and every single Thursday night on that balcony. Lucas reached out, cupping her face in his hands with a tenderness he'd never allowed himself before. I never said anything because I was scared, because I thought my life was too complicated, too messy, too much to ask anyone to share, because I convinced myself that your friendship was enough, when the truth is that I've been dying slowly for 12 years. Maya's eyes were glistening, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Lucas, I love you. The words came easier now, flowing from a dam finally broken. I love the way you laugh and the way you argue and the way you refuse to throw away magazines you've already read. I love that you know my daughter better than her own mother ever did. I love that you've been there for every important moment of my life, even when I was too afraid to tell you why that mattered so much. A tear slipped down Maya's cheek. Then why didn't you say something all those years? Because I was afraid of losing you. The friendship, the Thursday nights, the way Emma looks at you like you hung the moon. He stroked his thumb across her cheekbone, catching the tear. I'd rather have you in my life as a friend than risk losing you entirely. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Despite everything, Lucas felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, years of unspoken words finally released into the air between them. Lucas could feel Maya trembling under his hands, could see the same overwhelming emotion in her eyes that was threatening to consume him. What do we do now? She whispered. It was the question that had haunted Lucas since she told him about Seattle. The question he'd been dreading and avoiding and running from. But standing here, with her face between his palms and her heart finally laid bare before him, the answer seemed suddenly simple. Now, he said, we stop being afraid. And then, for the first time in 12 years of wanting, Lucas Reed leaned down and kissed the woman he'd always loved. Her lips were soft against his, tentative at first, and then deepening with the urgency of years denied. Maya's hands came up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, and Lucas felt something fundamental shift in the universe, like 2 planets that had been orbiting each other for eons finally colliding. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Maya laughed, a sound of pure, unfiltered joy. 12 years, she said. 12 years we wasted. No, Lucas shook his head, his forehead resting against hers. Not wasted, just took the scenic route. Maya laughed again, and the sound filled all the empty spaces in Lucas's heart. They had 2 weeks until she left for Seattle. 2 weeks to figure out what came next, to navigate the complicated logistics of long-distance love and single parenthood and all the obstacles that had kept them apart for so long. But for now, in this moment, all Lucas could feel was the warmth of Maya's body against his and the bone-deep certainty that he had finally stopped running from the best thing in his life. They had wasted 12 years. They wouldn't waste a single moment more. The kiss lingered between them like a promise, soft and certain, and everything Lucas had imagined it would be. When they finally separated, Maya kept her hands fisted in his shirt, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered. Lucas brushed a strand of hair from her face, marveling at the simple intimacy of the gesture. Neither can I. They stood there in the half-empty living room, surrounded by the cardboard evidence of her impending departure, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Not Seattle, Not the 2,000 miles that would soon stretch between them. Not the complicated logistics of loving someone while raising a child alone. Just this. Just them. Maya's phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the stillness. She glanced at it, then back at Lucas, her expression shifting. "It's Emma," she said. "She's asking if you're still coming to pick her up from robotics." Lucas checked his watch and swore under his breath. He'd completely lost track of time. "I'm supposed to be there in 20 minutes. Go." Maya stepped back, releasing his shirt with obvious reluctance. "We have 2 weeks to figure this out. Your daughter needs you now." The words hit Lucas with unexpected force. "Your daughter needs you now." It was exactly what she would have said before. Before the confession, before the kiss, before everything changed. But now, hearing it through the lens of their new reality, it felt different. Not like a dismissal or a reminder of his responsibilities, but like an acknowledgement, an acceptance. "Come with me," Lucas said impulsively. Maya's eyebrows rose. "What?" "Come with me to pick her up. We can get dinner, the three of us. She should know what's happening." He paused, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you think it's too soon." Maya was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "You want to tell her? Already?" "She's been watching us dance around each other for years. She deserves to know the truth." Lucas reached for Maya's hand, intertwining their fingers. "And honestly, I don't want to hide this. Not from her, not from anyone. I've spent 12 years hiding how I feel, and I'm done." Something soft and wondering crossed Maya's face. "Lucas Reed, emotional declaration machine. Who are you, and what have you done with my best friend?" He finally grew a spine. Lucas squeezed her hand. "Better late than never, right?" Maya laughed, and the sound filled him with a warmth he'd almost forgotten he could feel. "Let me grab my jacket." The drive to Emma's school passed in comfortable silence, their hands linked across the center console like teenagers on a first date. Lucas kept stealing glances at Maya, half convinced he was dreaming and would wake up any moment to find himself alone in his apartment, Thursday night stretching empty before him. But she was real. The warmth of her fingers against his was real, and somehow, impossibly, she loved him back. They pulled into the school parking lot just as students started emerging from the building, their arms full of robot components and laptops. Lucas spotted Emma immediately. She was walking with her friend Marcus, gesturing animatedly about something that had clearly gone well. When she saw Maya in the passenger seat, Emma's face lit up with surprise and delight. She said something to Marcus, then jogged toward the car, her robotics bag bouncing against her hip. "Maya!" Emma yanked open the back door and slid inside, bringing with her the smell of solder and adolescent enthusiasm. "I didn't know you were coming. Dad, why didn't you tell me Maya was coming?" "Surprise," Lucas said, catching his daughter's eye in the rearview mirror. Emma's gaze ping-ponged between them, and Lucas saw the exact moment she noticed their joined hands. Her eyes went wide. "Wait," she said slowly. "What's going on?" Lucas exchanged a look with Maya, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "We need to talk to you about something," Lucas said. "I thought we could grab dinner and—" "Oh my God!" Emma's voice had gone high and breathless. "Oh my God! Finally!" Maya twisted in her seat to look at her. "Emma! I knew it! I knew it!" Emma was practically bouncing, her earlier composure completely forgotten. "Marcus owes me $20. I told him you guys would figure it out before Maya left." Lucas felt his jaw drop. "You bet on us?" "Dad, please." Emma rolled her eyes with the exaggerated patience of a 12-year-old explaining basic concepts to a slow adult. Everyone could see it except you two. It was painful. Maya let out a surprised laugh. "Everyone?" "Everyone. Mrs. Patterson asked me last week if you guys were finally dating. Mrs. Patterson, Dad, the robotics teacher who barely remembers anyone's names." Lucas didn't know whether to be mortified or amused. He settled for somewhere in between. "So you're okay with this?" Emma's expression softened, losing some of its manic glee. "Dad, I've wanted you and Maya to be together since I was like 7. Remember when I used to make wedding invitations for you guys in art class?" Lucas did remember. He'd found stacks of them in Emma's desk drawer, Carefully decorated cards announcing the marriage of Lucas Reed and Maya Collins, complete with crayon flowers and crooked hearts. He'd assumed it was just a child's fantasy, the kind of wishful thinking that came from having a mother who'd vanished and a father who seemed perpetually alone. Now, looking at his daughter's shining eyes in the rearview mirror, he realized it had been something more, a hope she'd carried quietly for years, waiting for the adults in her life to catch up. "So that's a yes?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "That's a definitely yes." Emma leaned forward, wrapping her arms around the headrest of Maya's seat in an awkward but enthusiastic hug. "This is the best day ever. Can we get pizza to celebrate?" They ended up at a small Italian restaurant that had been their family favorite for years, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles and empty wine bottles. The owner, a round-faced woman named Rosa, who had known Lucas since he'd first started bringing Emma here as a toddler, took one look at their joined hands and burst into delighted exclamations. "Finally," she said, steering them to their usual booth. "Finally, finally! I've been waiting years for this." Lucas shot Maya a look that said, "See what I mean?" and she stifled a laugh behind her hand. Over steaming plates of pasta and fresh-baked bread, they talked, really talked, in a way they never had before, about feelings and fears and all the things they'd kept hidden for so long. Emma peppered them with questions, wanting to know exactly when they'd realized they loved each other, exactly why they'd taken so long, exactly what this meant for their future. It was that last question that finally brought the weight of reality crashing back down. "So what happens now?" Emma asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "Maya's still moving to Seattle, right?" The table went quiet. Lucas felt Maya's hand tighten on his, and he knew she was thinking the same thing he was. In the euphoria of finally admitting their feelings, they'd somehow managed to avoid confronting the obvious problem. She was leaving. In 2 weeks, she would be 2,000 miles away, and they had no idea how to bridge that distance. "I'm still taking the job," Maya said carefully. "It's an incredible opportunity, and I've already committed, but that doesn't mean—" She stopped, looking at Lucas as if seeking permission to continue. "That doesn't mean we're giving up," Lucas finished for her. "We'll figure it out. Long distance, visits, whatever it takes." Emma was quiet for a moment, her young face thoughtful in the candlelight. "What if we move too?" The suggestion hit Lucas like a thunderbolt. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Emma," Maya said gently, "that's a huge decision. Your dad has his job here. You have school, your robotics team." "I know." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, completely at odds with the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "But long distance is really hard. My friend Sarah's parents tried it when her mom got transferred, and they got divorced after like 6 months. She looked at Lucas with eyes that seemed far too wise for her 12 years. "I don't want that to happen to you guys." Lucas's throat tightened. His daughter, who had already lost one parent to abandonment, was sitting here advocating for them to uproot their entire lives rather than risk losing someone else. "Sweetheart," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his, "we're not going to let that happen. I promise." "You can't promise that." Emma's voice wobbled slightly, the first crack in her mature facade. "Mom promised she wouldn't leave either." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and painful. Lucas saw Maya's face crumple with empathy, saw her hand reach out instinctively toward Emma. "I'm not your mom," Maya said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not really. Seattle is just a place I'll be working. This—" She gestured around the table at the three of them together. "This is home." Emma stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, she slid out of her side of the booth and threw herself into Maya's arms. Lucas watched as the woman he loved held his daughter, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances into her ear. Something fundamental shifted in his chest, a piece of the wall he'd built around his heart finally crumbling to dust. "This," he thought, "this is what I was afraid of losing. Not just Maya's friendship or her presence in his life, but this, the way she loved Emma without reservation, the way she'd slipped into their family like she'd always belonged there, the way she made them both feel safe in a world that had given them too many reasons to be afraid." He couldn't lose this. He wouldn't. The thought crystallized into something solid and certain, settling into his bones like bedrock. Whatever it took, whatever sacrifices had to be made, he would find a way to keep this family together. Later that night, after dropping Maya home with a kiss that made him feel like a teenager again, Lucas sat on the edge of Emma's bed for their nightly ritual. She was already in her pajamas, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a halo, but her eyes were alert and watchful. "Dad?" "Yeah, honey. Were you really going to let her leave without telling her?" The question pierced him with its quiet accusation. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "I was scared." "Of what?" "Of everything. Of ruining our friendship. Of asking her to take on the complicated mess of my life. Of not being enough for her." He paused, struggling to find words for feelings he'd barely acknowledged to himself. "Your mom left because I wasn't enough. Because the reality of being a parent, of being responsible for someone else, was more than she could handle. I was afraid Maya would eventually feel the same way." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Maya's not Mom." "I know that now. She's been helping you raise me since I was a baby. She already knows all the hard stuff, and she stayed anyway." Emma propped herself up on one elbow, fixing Lucas with a stern look that reminded him uncomfortably of his own mother. "You were being dumb." Despite everything, Lucas laughed. "Yeah, I really was. Don't be dumb anymore, okay? I like having Maya around. I don't want you to mess this up. I'll do my best." Emma seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Good. Also, you should definitely move to Seattle. I looked it up, and they have some really good robotics programs there. And it rains a lot, which I think would be cool because I'm tired of it being sunny all the time." Lucas stared at his daughter, marveling at the casual way she'd just suggested they uproot their entire lives. "You looked it up?" "I've been looking it up for weeks, since Maya told us about the job." Emma shrugged. "I figured one of you would eventually stop being dumb, and I wanted to be prepared." "You really want to move? Leave your friends, your school, everything?" Emma was quiet for a moment, her young face unusually serious. "I want you to be happy, Dad. You've spent my whole life making sure I was okay, and you never ask for anything for yourself. Maya makes you happy. So yeah, I'd move to Seattle or Antarctica or the moon if that's what it took." Lucas's eyes burned with sudden, unexpected tears. He gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "When did you get so smart?" he murmured into her hair. "I've always been smart. You just weren't paying attention." He laughed, a wet sound that was half sob, and held her tighter. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of contradictions. The giddy joy of new love tangled inextricably with the looming grief of separation. Lucas and Maya spent every possible moment together, making up for 12 years of restraint with a hunger that surprised them both. They held hands in public, drawing smiles from strangers and knowing looks from friends. They kissed in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, earning an exaggerated gross from Emma and a round of applause from an elderly woman in the produce section. They stayed up too late talking on Maya's balcony, their Thursday night tradition now infused with touches and glances that would have been unthinkable before. But beneath the happiness, Lucas could feel time slipping away like sand through his fingers. Every sunset brought them closer to the day she would leave. Every shared laugh was shadowed by the knowledge that soon they would be separated by half a country. "I've been thinking," he said one evening, 3 days before her flight. They were sitting on her balcony again, surrounded by the last of her boxes. The apartment looked bare now, stripped of everything that had made it feel like her. Maya looked at him, her eyes soft in the fading light. "Dangerous territory. Emma wants us to move to Seattle." The words hung in the air between them. Maya's expression shifted through a dozen emotions: surprise, hope, fear, uncertainty, before settling into something careful and guarded. "Lucas, I know it sounds crazy. I know we just figured this out, and it's too fast, and there are a million reasons why it's a terrible idea." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "But I've spent 12 years not doing things because they seemed too risky or too complicated. And look where that got me. That's different. That was just about telling me how you felt. This is about uprooting your whole life, Emma's whole life. My life isn't here." Lucas gestured at the city spread out below them, the lights beginning to flicker on as dusk deepened into evening. It was never really here. My life is wherever you and Emma are. Everything else is just geography. Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You can't make a decision like this after 2 weeks. What if you regret it? What if you resent me for making you leave everything behind? You're not making me do anything, and I could never resent you. He squeezed her hands, willing her to understand. Maya, I've already spent 12 years regretting the things I didn't do. I'm not going to add this to the list. What about your job? You've worked your way up at that company for years. There are construction companies in Seattle. Better ones, probably, with all the tech money flowing through. I've already started looking. Maya stared at him. You've already started looking? I told you, Emma did the research weeks ago. All I had to do was update my resume. He smiled a little sheepishly. Apparently, Seattle has some really good robotics programs, and a lot of rain, which she's inexplicably excited about. A laugh bubbled up from Maya's chest, breaking through the tension. She really is something, your kid. She's our kid, Lucas said quietly. She has been for years, even if we never called it that. She loves you, Maya, not as a family friend or a surrogate aunt. She loves you like a parent, and I think she's terrified of losing you. The tears Maya had been holding back finally spilled over, tracking silent paths down her cheeks. I'm terrified too, she whispered. I've been terrified since the moment I told you I was leaving, because I finally had what I wanted, and it felt like I was going to lose it before I even got to keep it. You're not going to lose anything. Lucas reached up to wipe her tears away, the same gesture he'd made 100 times before, but now charged with new meaning. I'm not letting you go. Not again. Not ever. They sat there as darkness fell completely, wrapped in each other's arms, and the weight of the choice before them. It was terrifying, the magnitude of what Lucas was proposing, the way it would reshape everything he'd known. But beneath the fear was something stronger, a certainty that had been building for 12 years, finally given permission to exist. This was right. This was what he was meant to do. And for the first time in his life, Lucas Reed was ready to stop being afraid. The night before Maya's flight, they threw a going-away party at her mostly empty apartment. It was a small gathering, close friends, a few colleagues, Emma with her robot prototype under one arm, but it felt significant, important, like an ending and a beginning wrapped into one. Lucas watched Maya move through the room, accepting hugs and well wishes with the grace she brought to everything. She looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, her smile bright enough to illuminate the whole apartment. But he knew her well enough to see the sadness beneath the surface, the way her eyes kept drifting toward him across the room, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was watching. They hadn't told anyone about their plans. Not yet. It felt too fragile, too new, too easily shattered by outside opinions and well-meaning advice. For now, this was theirs alone, a secret shared between Lucas, Maya, and Emma. As the party wound down and guests began trickling out, Emma appeared at Lucas's elbow. I'm getting tired, she said, though the alertness in her eyes suggested otherwise. Can we go home soon? Lucas glanced at Maya, who was saying goodbye to the last of her work friends. Yeah, honey, just give me a few minutes. When they were finally alone, Maya, Lucas, and Emma, in the echoing emptiness of the apartment, the atmosphere shifted. The pretense of celebration fell away, revealing the raw emotion beneath. I can't believe this is really happening, Maya said, sinking onto the one remaining piece of furniture, a worn couch that was too big to ship cross-country. Tomorrow I'll be in Seattle, and everything will be different. Lucas sat beside her, Emma squeezing in on her other side. Not everything, he said. Maya turned to look at him, her eyes questioning. We haven't told you our plan yet, Lucas said. We were waiting for the right moment, but I think this is it. He looked at Emma, who nodded eagerly. We're coming with you, Emma blurted out before Lucas could continue. To Seattle. We're going to move there too. Maya's face went through another kaleidoscope of emotions. What? Lucas, we talked about this, and I've made my decision. Lucas took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm not asking for permission or approval. I'm telling you what I'm going to do, what we're going to do as a family. But the logistics, the timing, I can't leave until Emma finishes her robotics competition next month, Lucas admitted. And I need to give notice at work, Start the job search officially. Find a place for us to live. So it won't be immediate. A few months, maybe. But the point is, Emma jumped in, we're not just going to do long distance until someone gives up. We're coming to you, for real. Maya looked between them, father and daughter united in their determination, and something in her expression cracked. You're serious, she whispered. Dead serious, Lucas confirmed. But what if it doesn't work? What if you hate Seattle or the job market is terrible or... Then we figure it out together, Lucas interrupted. That's what families do. They face things together, not apart. The word hung in the air between them. Family. It was the first time any of them had used it explicitly, had named the thing they'd been building toward for years. Maya's tears started again. Happy ones this time, Lucas hoped. She pulled Emma into a fierce hug, then reached for Lucas, gathering them both against her. I love you, she said, the words muffled against Lucas's shoulder. Both of you, I love you so much. We love you too, Emma said. Even when you steal my fries. Maya laughed, a watery sound that was half sob. I'm never going to stop stealing your fries. I know. That's okay. You're worth it. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them tangled together on the worn couch in the empty apartment. Outside, the city hummed its familiar song, oblivious to the magnitude of what was happening within these walls. A family was being born, not from blood or obligation, but from choice, from years of quiet love and the courage to finally claim it. The next morning, Lucas and Emma drove Maya to the airport. The ride was quieter than he'd expected, not awkward, but weighted with the significance of the moment. Maya sat in the passenger seat, her hand wrapped tightly around Lucas's on the console, while Emma leaned forward from the back seat, unwilling to be left out. At the departures terminal, they unloaded Maya's bags and stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the drop-off zone. Other travelers hurried past them, caught up in their own journeys, their own goodbyes. This isn't really goodbye, Lucas said, pulling Maya into his arms. It's just, see you later. See you later, Maya echoed, her voice thick. A few months later. I'll call you every day, Emma promised, hovering nearby, and I'll send you videos of my robot and pictures of Dad being sad and missing you. I won't be sad, Lucas protested. You'll be devastated. Don't lie. Maya laughed through her tears, reaching out to pull Emma into their embrace. For a moment, they stood there, a tangle of arms and love and hope, blocking the flow of airport traffic and not caring at all. I have to go, Maya finally said, pulling back. My flight, I know. Lucas kissed her, soft and sweet, a promise pressed against her lips. Go crush it in Seattle. We'll be there before you know it. Maya nodded, wiping her eyes. She hugged Emma one more time, whispered something in her ear that made the girl smile, then grabbed her bags and walked toward the terminal entrance. At the doors, she turned back to look at them one last time. Lucas raised his hand in a wave, Emma doing the same beside him. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowds and the bustle of the airport. They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, staring at the doors that had just closed behind the woman they loved. She's going to be okay, Emma said quietly. Yeah. Lucas's voice was rough. She is. And we're going to be okay too. He looked down at his daughter, this fierce, brilliant, tender-hearted girl who had somehow become his anchor in every storm. Yeah, honey, we are. Emma slipped her hand into his, her small fingers fitting perfectly against his calloused palm. Let's go home, Dad. We've got a lot of planning to do. Lucas squeezed her hand and turned away from the terminal. The next few months would be hard. The missing and the waiting and the endless logistics of rebuilding a life in a new city. But for the first time in as long as he could remember, the future didn't feel like something to be survived. It felt like something to be embraced. The weeks following Maya's departure settled into a new rhythm, one that felt simultaneously empty and full of potential. Lucas threw himself into the practicalities of their planned move with an intensity that surprised even himself. He updated his resume, reached out to construction companies in Seattle, and started the slow process of disentangling himself from a life he'd built over a decade. Emma, true to her word, documented everything. She created a shared photo album called Dad Being Pathetic Without Maya, and filled it with candid shots of Lucas staring wistfully out windows, sighing over dinner and falling asleep on the couch with his phone still clutched in his hand. For posterity, she explained when Lucas demanded she delete them. Maya thinks they're hilarious. You're sharing these with her. Obviously, she shares ones of herself too. Look, here she is crying in her new apartment because the sunset reminded her of our balcony. Lucas looked at the photo and felt his heart twist. Maya was sitting by a window in an unfamiliar room, the Seattle skyline visible behind her, tear tracks visible on her cheeks. She looked beautiful and broken and exactly how he felt. We're a mess, he said. A mess that's going to be together in a few months, Emma reminded him. Focus on the goal. The goal. Lucas repeated it to himself like a mantra during the hard nights, when the silence of the apartment felt oppressive and the weight of Maya's absence pressed down on his chest. He'd wake up reaching for her, his hand finding only cold sheets and empty air. He'd start to tell her something, then remember she wasn't there. But then his phone would ring, her face appearing on the screen, and everything would feel manageable again. I found an apartment, Maya said during one of their nightly calls, 3 weeks after she'd left. Lucas was lying on his bed, the phone propped against the pillow beside him, her face illuminated in the darkness. It's bigger than the old one. 3 bedrooms. His heart stuttered. 3? One for me, one for Emma, one for you. She smiled, but there was vulnerability beneath it. I mean, if that's what you want. I know we haven't really talked about the specifics of how this will work. I want that, Lucas said quickly. I want all of it. The apartment, the bedrooms, the life. I want everything. Maya's smile widened, losing its uncertainty. Yeah? Yeah. He reached out to touch the screen, a foolish gesture that connected nothing but somehow made him feel closer to her. Send me pictures. Emma and I want to see our new home. Our new home. The words felt foreign and right all at once. The pictures arrived the next morning, a light-filled space with hardwood floors and big windows that looked out over the city. Emma immediately began planning her room, sending Maya detailed specifications about desk placement and wall colors and the exact location where her robot trophy shelf would go. She's already nesting, Maya laughed during their video call. I love it. She's been ready for this for years, Lucas said. We both have. It was true, he realized. The restlessness he'd felt for so long, the sense that something fundamental was missing from his life. It hadn't been about location or career or the absence of romantic companionship. It had been about this, about Maya, about the life they were finally building together. Emma's robotics competition fell on a Saturday in late October, 6 weeks after Maya's departure. The gymnasium was packed with anxious parents and determined students, tables laden with mechanical creations of varying complexity. Emma's robot, a compact machine she'd named Phoenix after numerous rebuilds from failed experiments, sat ready on her team's designated table. She's nervous, Lucas observed, watching Emma fidget with her control panel. She'll be fine, Maya's voice assured him through his earbuds. She was watching via video call, the phone propped in Lucas's pocket with the camera peeking out. She's been preparing for this for months. I know, I just hate seeing her anxious. That's because you're a good dad. The warmth of her words spread through him, settling in his chest like a physical presence. 2,000 miles away, and she could still make him feel like everything would be okay. The competition proceeded through its rounds, each team putting their robots through a series of challenges designed to test programming, mechanics, and adaptability. Emma's team started slow, stumbling through the first obstacle course, but Phoenix found its stride in the second round. By the third challenge, they were in the running for regionals. Come on, Lucas murmured, his hands clenched at his sides. Come on, come on. The final task was a precision test. Each robot had to navigate a complex maze while picking up objects and depositing them in designated zones. Points were awarded for speed and accuracy, with penalties for dropped items or wrong turns. Phoenix entered the maze with mechanical determination. Lucas watched his daughter's face as she controlled the robot, her brow furrowed in concentration, her fingers flying across the control panel with practiced precision. The robot picked up its first object, then its second. It navigated a tight corner that had stymied 3 other teams and approached the first deposit zone. The object dropped perfectly into place. A cheer went up from Emma's teammates. Lucas felt his heart pounding in his throat. Phoenix continued through the maze, executing each task with increasing confidence. By the time it reached the final deposit zone, Emma's team was in 3rd place, just seconds behind the leaders. The last object hovered over the zone. Emma's hands were shaking on the controls. "Steady," Lucas whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "You've got this." The object dropped. The buzzer sounded, and Emma's team surged into 2nd place, qualifying for regionals by a margin of 0.4 of a second. The explosion of noise was deafening. Emma was lifted off her feet by her teammates, her face split in a grin so wide it looked almost painful. Lucas pushed through the crowd to reach her, gathering her into a hug that lifted her off the ground. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with pride. "You actually did it." "We did it," Emma corrected, slightly breathless. "Phoenix did most of the work." Phoenix had a pretty amazing creator. Emma's smile softened, and she pulled his phone from his pocket, turning the camera toward her face. "Maya, did you see? We made regionals." "I saw everything." Maya's voice was thick with emotion, even through the tiny speakers. "Emma, I'm so proud of you. That last drop was incredible. I was so nervous I almost threw up." "Well, you didn't, and that's what matters. We're celebrating when I come home for Thanksgiving, okay? Whatever restaurant you want." "Thai Palace," Emma said immediately. "They have the best mango sticky rice." "Thai Palace it is. Now let your dad talk to me while you go celebrate with your team. You've earned it." Emma handed the phone back to Lucas, already turning toward her teammates who were clustered around Phoenix, examining the robot's mechanisms with the intensity of surgeons reviewing a successful operation. Lucas stepped away from the crowd, finding a quieter corner of the gymnasium. "That was incredible," he said, unable to keep the shake out of his voice. "Maya, she was incredible." "She was. And so were you, watching her. I could see your face through the whole thing." Maya's voice softened. "You looked like you were going to cry." "I was not going to cry." "You were absolutely going to cry." "It's okay." "I cried a little." Lucas laughed, pressing the phone closer to his ears if he could somehow bridge the distance between them. "I miss you." "I miss you too, but Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks, and then we start planning the move for real." Lucas took a deep breath. "I got a call back from Harmon Construction. They want a second interview." Maya gasped. "Lucas, why didn't you tell me? I just found out this morning. I was going to wait until tonight, but..." He glanced across the gymnasium at Emma, who was posing for photos with her trophy. It felt like a good news kind of day. The best kind of day. Maya's smile was audible through the phone. "When's the interview?" "The week before Thanksgiving. I'm flying out early to do it in person." "You're coming early?" The hope in her voice made his heart ache. "If that's okay." "Lucas Reed, that is more than okay. That is perfect." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped to something softer, more intimate. "I can't wait to see you. I can't wait for all of this to finally be real." "It's already real," Lucas said. "It's been real for 12 years. We just finally stopped pretending otherwise." They ended the call with promises and plans, the kind of hopeful logistics that made the distance feel almost bearable. Lucas pocketed his phone and made his way back to Emma, who was showing her trophy to an admiring circle of parents. "Regional champions," she announced when she saw him. "Well, regionally qualified. Champion sounds better, though." "It does." Lucas draped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm proud of you, kid." "I know." She leaned into him, the trophy clutched against her chest. "I'm proud of me, too." They drove home in comfortable silence, the trophy balanced carefully on Emma's lap. As the familiar streets rolled past, Lucas found himself looking at everything with new eyes. The coffee shop where he'd spent countless Saturday mornings, the park where he'd taught Emma to ride a bike, the apartment complex that had been home for almost a decade. Soon, all of it would be memories. Photographs in an album, stories to tell their Seattle friends about where they came from. The thought should have been sad. Instead, it felt like anticipation. "Dad?" Emma's voice broke through his reverie. "Yeah? Do you think we'll be happy in Seattle?" Lucas considered the question carefully. His daughter deserved more than platitudes or false assurances. I think happiness isn't about where you are, he said finally. It's about who you're with, and we're going to be with Maya, so, yeah, I think we're going to be really happy. Emma nodded slowly, processing this. That's a good answer. I have my moments. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. Very occasional moments. I'll take what I can get. They pulled into their parking spot as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Lucas sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, watching the colors spread across the horizon. In 3 weeks, he would see Maya again. In a few months, they would be starting their new life together. 12 years of waiting, of wanting, of loving from a distance, it was all finally leading somewhere. And Lucas Reed, single father and chronic overthinker, was ready to follow that path wherever it led. The 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving passed in a strange contradiction of agonizing slowness and breathless speed. Each day without Maya stretched into eternity, but the preparations for Lucas's trip to Seattle consumed every spare moment, until suddenly, impossibly, he was standing at the departure gate with a carry-on bag and a heart full of nervous anticipation. Emma had insisted on driving him to the airport, even though she'd only had her learner's permit for 2 months and technically needed a licensed adult in the car. Lucas's mother had volunteered to sit in the passenger seat, her knuckles white against the door handle as Emma navigated the highway with the careful intensity of someone piloting a spacecraft. You're going to be fine, Lucas told his daughter for the 100th time as they pulled into the departures lane. Grandma will be there if you need anything, and I'll only be gone a week. Dad, I'm 12. I think I can survive 7 days without you hovering. She'll be fine, Lucas's mother echoed from the front seat. We're going to have a wonderful time. I'm teaching her to make my mother's apple pie recipe for Thanksgiving. See? Apple pie. Very wholesome, very supervised. Emma grinned at him in the rearview mirror. Now get out before you miss your flight and ruin everything. Lucas leaned forward to kiss his daughter's cheek, then did the same to his mother. I love you both. Call me if anything happens. Nothing's going to happen, Emma said. Except you finally getting to see Maya, so stop stalling and go. He went. The flight felt interminable, each minute stretching like taffy as the plane carried him closer to the woman he loved. Lucas tried to read, tried to sleep, tried to watch the in-flight movie, but his mind kept circling back to the same thought. In a few hours, he would be holding Maya again. It had only been 6 weeks since she'd left. 6 weeks of phone calls and video chats, and the particular torture of seeing her face on a screen while being unable to touch her. It felt like 6 years. When the plane finally touched down at SeaTac, Lucas was out of his seat before the seatbelt sign had fully dimmed. He navigated the airport in a fog of anticipation, following the signs to baggage claim without really seeing them. And then he was through the security doors, and she was there. Maya stood at the front of the waiting crowd, wearing a green coat he'd never seen before, and holding a handwritten sign that said, Lucas Reed, professional idiot, who took 12 years to confess his feelings. The laugh that burst from Lucas's chest felt like it had been building for weeks. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, swept her into his arms, and kissed her with all the desperation of the separation that had preceded it. The crowd around them faded into white noise. Nothing existed except Maya's lips against his, her arms wrapped around his neck, her body pressed against his in a way that felt like coming home. Hi, she whispered when they finally broke apart. Hi yourself. Lucas couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop touching her, her face, her hair, the familiar curve of her shoulders beneath the unfamiliar coat. Nice sign. I thought it captured the essence of our love story. You're not going to let me live that down, are you? Never. Maya pulled back to look at him, her eyes traveling over his face like she was memorizing it. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping well. My bed's too empty. Something soft and vulnerable crossed her expression. Mine too. They stood there in the middle of the airport, oblivious to the travelers streaming around them, lost in the simple miracle of being in the same place at the same time. Come on, Maya finally said, threading her fingers through his. Let's go home. Home. The word settled into Lucas's chest like a warm weight. The drive to Maya's apartment took them through a Seattle transformed by the approach of winter. Rain streaked the windshield, the sky a moody gray that somehow felt appropriate for the occasion. Lucas watched the unfamiliar streets roll past, trying to imagine this as his daily landscape, his regular commute, his life. "It's different than I expected," he admitted. "Good different or bad different?" "Just different. More hills, more green, even in November." He glanced at her profile, softened by the gray light filtering through the rain. "But it feels right. Being here with you feels right." Maya reached over to squeeze his hand. "Wait until you see the apartment. Emma's been sending me increasingly detailed instructions for her room. Apparently the position of the desk is non-negotiable, and the walls must be a shade of blue that suggests calm competence." Lucas laughed. "That sounds like Emma. She's been planning this move since before we even decided to make it. She's an amazing kid, Lucas. You've done an incredible job with her." "We've done an incredible job with her. You've been there for every important moment. She's who she is partly because of you." Maya was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the road. When she spoke again, her voice was thick. "I've never felt like I deserved that. The way she looks at me. The way you both just accepted me into your family. I always felt like I was borrowing something that wasn't mine. It was always yours." Lucas turned in his seat to face her fully. "Maya, from the first time you held Emma as a baby, you were part of us. The only thing that's changed is that now we're calling it what it's always been." She pulled the car to the side of the road, ignoring the honking from the vehicle behind them, and turned to kiss him with an intensity that left them both breathless. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you too. Now please start driving again before that guy behind us has an aneurysm." Maya laughed and pulled back onto the road, but her hand found his again and didn't let go for the rest of the drive. The apartment was everything the pictures had promised and more. Light poured through the windows despite the overcast sky, illuminating hardwood floors and high ceilings and walls painted in warm, welcoming colors. Maya had already started decorating. There were familiar touches everywhere, pieces of the life she'd left behind blended with new acquisitions that spoke of fresh starts. "Emma's room is through there," Maya said, gesturing toward a closed door. "I've been setting it up based on her specifications. I think she'll like it." Lucas walked to the door and pushed it open. The room was smaller than Emma's current one, but Maya had transformed it into something magical. The walls were painted the exact shade of blue Emma had requested. Calm competence, Lucas thought with a smile. A desk sat beneath the window, positioned to catch the natural light. Shelves lined one wall, ready to hold trophies and books and the accumulated treasures of a 12-year-old's life. "It's perfect," he said, his voice rough. "I wanted her to feel at home. I wanted you both to feel like this is really yours, not just a place you're moving into for my sake." Lucas turned to look at her, standing in the doorway with that familiar, uncertain expression, the one that said she was offering something precious and wasn't sure it would be accepted. "This isn't for your sake," he said. "This is for all of us. Our sake. Because we're a family now, Maya. That's what this is." She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and buried herself in his arms. Lucas held her tight, feeling the slight tremor in her shoulders, the way she pressed her face into his chest like she was trying to absorb him through her skin. "I've been so scared," she admitted, "that something would go wrong, that you'd change your mind, that I'd wake up and this would all be a dream." "It's not a dream." Lucas pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not anymore." They spent the rest of the day exploring the apartment, making plans, building a vision of their future together. Maya showed him the master bedroom, their bedroom, she called it, with a shy smile that made his heart flip, and the small home office where she'd been working remotely before officially starting at Morrison and Blake. She walked him through the neighborhood, pointing out the coffee shop she'd discovered, the park 2 blocks over, the elementary school that Emma would pass on her way to the middle school 4 blocks beyond. "I've been researching the robotics programs," Maya said, as they walked hand in hand through the light rain. "There's a STEM academy that feeds into a really strong high school program. I think Emma would thrive there." "You've been researching schools?" "Of course. She's going to need the best possible environment for her talents." Maya paused, looking suddenly uncertain. "Is that okay?" "I don't want to overstep. You're her father, and these decisions should be yours." "Maya." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her on the rain-slicked sidewalk. "Stop. You're not overstepping. You're being a parent. That's what I want you to be." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really? I want you to help me make decisions about her education and her future and her everything. I want you to be there for her first heartbreak and her college applications and her wedding someday if she decides to have one." He cupped her face in his hands, rain dripping from their hair. "I want you to be her mother, Maya, in every way that matters." The tears that spilled down Maya's cheeks mixed with the rain, indistinguishable from the sky. "I don't know if I know how to do that. Neither did I when Emma was born. You figure it out as you go, and you won't be doing it alone. We're in this together." They stood there in the rain, two people who had loved each other for over a decade, finally allowing themselves to claim it fully. The passers-by gave them strange looks. Who stands making out in the middle of a Seattle downpour? But neither of them cared. This was their moment, their beginning, and a little rain wasn't going to diminish it. The job interview the next morning was at Harmon Construction's downtown office, a sleek building that spoke of success and ambition. Lucas arrived 20 minutes early, his best suit slightly wrinkled from the suitcase, his nerves jangling like wind chimes in a storm. The interview itself went better than he had dared to hope. David Harmon, the company's founder and CEO, turned out to be a no-nonsense man in his 60s who appreciated Lucas's practical experience and straightforward manner. They talked about projects and techniques, about the unique challenges of construction in Seattle's climate and geography, about Lucas's career trajectory and future goals. "I'll be honest with you," Harmon said near the end of the interview. "We've had a lot of applicants for this position. Most of them have more credentials than you do, fancy degrees, certifications from programs I've never heard of." Lucas's stomach sank. "I understand. But credentials don't build buildings. Experience does. Instinct does. The ability to look at a problem and see 3 ways to solve it before the engineer finishes explaining what's wrong." Harmon leaned back in his chair, studying Lucas with sharp eyes. "You've got that. I can tell." "I've been doing this a long time," Lucas said carefully. "It's the only thing I know how to do." "And you're moving across the country for a woman?" The question caught Lucas off guard. "How did you—" "My assistant does thorough research. You're leaving a stable job and uprooting your daughter to follow your girlfriend to Seattle." Harmon's expression was unreadable. "Some would say that's reckless. Some would say it's 12 years overdue." A smile cracked Harmon's weathered face. "I moved to Seattle for a woman 40 years ago. Best decision I ever made." He stood up and extended his hand. "Welcome to Harmon Construction, Mr. Reed. When can you start?" Lucas shook his hand, too stunned to form words for a moment. "I need to go back and wrap things up. Give notice, help Emma finish the semester, pack up our apartment. 2 months, maybe? We'll have a desk waiting for you. And Mr. Reed?" Harmon's grip tightened briefly. "Don't waste any more time. 12 years is long enough." Lucas left the building in a daze, his heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and elation. He had a job. A real job. At a respected company. In the city where Maya lived. The last major obstacle to their plan had just evaporated. He called her as soon as he reached the street, unable to contain the news. "I got it," he said before she could even finish saying hello. "Maya, I got the job." Her scream of joy was loud enough that several pedestrians turned to stare. "Lucas, oh my God, you got it?" "I got it. I start in 2 months. We're really doing this, Maya. It's really happening." They met for lunch at a restaurant near her office, their celebration spilling over into extended conversation about timelines and logistics and all the practical details that suddenly felt so much more real. Maya had taken the afternoon off, and they spent it wandering through the city, exploring neighborhoods and dreaming out loud about their future. "There's a farmer's market on Sundays," Maya said as they passed a square that was currently empty but apparently transformed on weekends. "We could come as a family. Emma would love it." Emma would complain about having to wake up early on a weekend. "She'd complain, but she'd love it. She's just like you that way." Lucas laughed, pulling Maya closer against the chill wind. "I'm not that bad." "You're exactly that bad. Remember the time I dragged you to that sunrise yoga class? That was one time, and it was 6 in the morning, on a Saturday. You whined for 3 hours afterward. I don't whine. I express legitimate concerns about unreasonable wake-up times." Maya's laughter rang out across the square, bright and free, and everything Lucas had ever wanted to hear. He stopped walking, turning her to face him, and kissed her right there in the middle of the future farmer's market. "What was that for?" she asked when they broke apart. "For being patient, for waiting, for not giving up on me even when I was too scared to see what was right in front of me." Lucas traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. "I wasted so much time, Maya. I'm not wasting any more." "We both wasted time. We both could have said something years ago." She covered his hand with hers. "But we're here now. That's what matters." They walked back to the apartment as the sun began to set, painting the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and purple. The rain had cleared, leaving the air fresh and clean, full of the promise of new beginnings. That night, in the apartment that would soon be their shared home, Lucas and Maya fell asleep in each other's arms for the first time. It wasn't about passion, though there was that too. It was about finally being where they belonged, with the person they belonged with. It was about coming home. Thanksgiving arrived with a flurry of activity and anticipation. Emma and Lucas's mother flew in Wednesday evening, their arrival transforming Maya's quiet apartment into a hub of noise and laughter and barely controlled chaos. Emma burst through the door like a small hurricane, immediately launching herself at Maya before turning to inspect her future room with a critical eye. "The desk is perfect," she pronounced, "and I love the color. It's exactly what I described." "I had good instructions," Maya said, her face glowing with pleasure. "What do you think about the shelving?" They disappeared into the room, their voices rising and falling in animated discussion about organization systems and display strategies. Lucas watched them go, his heart full to bursting. His mother appeared at his elbow, her expression knowing. "She's going to be a wonderful mother to that girl." "She already is." "I always knew you two would end up together." His mother patted his arm. "Even when you were teenagers, mooning over each other and pretending you were just friends. Your father and I used to make bets about when one of you would finally make a move." Lucas stared at her. "You knew? All this time?" "Sweetheart, everyone knew. You were the only two who couldn't see it." She shook her head with fond exasperation. 12 years. Your father would have been insufferable about it. He bet you'd figure it out by 30. "I'm 34. "Yes, and he's been gone for 5 years now, so he never got to collect. But I think he'd be happy for you. He always loved Maya." The mention of his father brought a familiar ache, softened now by time and distance. Lucas's dad had passed away suddenly, a heart attack that had come without warning and left a hole in their family that had never quite healed. "I wish he could be here," Lucas said quietly. "He is, in his way." His mother squeezed his arm. "Now come help me figure out how to make a turkey in an unfamiliar kitchen. Maya says she has all the equipment, but I have my doubts." The kitchen proved adequate to the task, though Lucas's mother spent the first hour rearranging everything to her satisfaction. Maya joined the cooking process with enthusiasm, if not skill, her attempts to help frequently requiring supervision and correction. "You're letting the butter get too brown," Lucas's mother observed gently. "Here, let me show you." "I'm hopeless at cooking," Maya admitted. "I've survived on takeout and cereal for most of my adult life." "You're not hopeless, you just haven't had anyone to teach you." His mother handed her a wooden spoon. "Now stir this while I check on the potatoes. Slow, even strokes. Like this." Lucas watched the two women working side by side, his mother's patient instruction and Maya's determined concentration, and felt something settle into place in his chest. This was what family looked like. Not just the people you were born to, but the people you chose. Thanksgiving dinner was a triumph. The turkey emerged golden and glistening, surrounded by dishes that represented a blend of traditions. His mother's southern cornbread stuffing, Maya's attempt at her grandmother's sweet potato casserole, Emma's contribution of surprisingly excellent homemade dinner rolls. They ate at Maya's small dining table, crammed together in a way that should have been uncomfortable, but instead felt intimate. Stories flowed freely, old memories and new observations weaving together into a tapestry of shared experience. "Remember the time Dad tried to deep fry a turkey and almost burned down the apartment?" Emma asked, grinning at Lucas. "That was one time," Lucas protested, "and the fire was very small." The fire department didn't think it was small. They were being dramatic. It was barely a spark. Maya was laughing so hard she had to put down her fork. Wait, the fire department came? You never told me this story. Because it's embarrassing and Emma is a traitor for bringing it up. I'm not a traitor. I'm a keeper of family history. Emma turned to Maya with the air of someone about to share privileged information. He singed off his eyebrows, both of them. He looked like a surprised egg for 3 weeks. The table erupted in laughter. Lucas tried to maintain his dignity, but the sound of Maya's joy was too infectious. Soon he was laughing too, surrendering to the absurdity of the memory and the warmth of being surrounded by people who loved him. After dinner, they gathered in the living room, too full to move, but too content to separate. Emma sprawled on the floor, working on a sketch for a new robot design. Lucas's mother settled into an armchair with a cup of tea, and Lucas and Maya shared the couch, their bodies pressed together in comfortable intimacy. This is nice, Emma said without looking up from her drawing. Being together like this? It is, Maya agreed. We should do it more often. We will. Lucas pulled her closer. Every holiday, every weekend, every moment we can. His mother smiled into her teacup. I always knew you'd figure it out eventually. So you keep saying. Well, it bears repeating. Some lessons take longer to learn than others. She set down her cup and rose from her chair. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to bed. Traveling at my age is exhausting, and tomorrow I want to explore this city with my granddaughter. I want to go to the Space Needle, Emma announced. Then the Space Needle it is. Good night, everyone. She disappeared down the hall to the guest room, leaving the three of them in comfortable silence. Emma continued her sketching, occasionally asking Maya questions about design aesthetics that Lucas couldn't begin to answer. He watched them interact, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt the last traces of his old fears dissolving like morning mist. This was what he'd been so afraid of losing, this easy intimacy, this sense of belonging, this family that had existed in all but name for years. He'd been so worried about risking what they had that he'd almost missed the chance to make it something more. Never again, he promised himself. Never again would he let fear keep him from the people he loved. Emma finally yawned and announced she was going to bed, pausing to hug both of them before disappearing into her new room. Lucas heard her exclaiming over some detail Maya had added, a small reading lamp maybe, or the collection of astronomy posters that had arrived earlier that week. She's happy, Maya said softly. She is. You make her happy. We make her happy. All of us, together. Maya turned in his arms, her face inches from his. Lucas, I need to tell you something. His heart rate spiked with sudden anxiety. What is it? I've been offered a promotion, senior partner at Morrison and Blake. They want me to head the entire creative division. Relief flooded through him, quickly followed by pride. Maya, that's incredible. Why do you look so worried? Because it comes with more responsibility, more travel, more hours. She bit her lip, the familiar gesture of uncertainty. I'm worried it won't leave enough time for us. For Emma. I don't want to finally have this family and then never be around for it. Lucas cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. You have worked your entire career for an opportunity like this. You are brilliant and talented, and you deserve every success that comes your way. And we, Emma and I, we are going to be your biggest cheerleaders, no matter what. But what about being present? What about dinners together and homework help and all the things a family is supposed to do? We'll figure it out. That's what families do. We adapt, we adjust, we make it work. He kissed her forehead gently. You're not going to lose us by being successful, Maya. We're not going anywhere. Tears glistened in her eyes. Promise? I promise. And I've learned that when I make a promise to someone I love, I have to actually keep it, even when it's scary. Maya laughed through her tears, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of salt and gratitude and hope. They stayed up late that night, talking about the future in a way they never had before. Not just the immediate logistics of the move, but the bigger picture, careers and aspirations and dreams they'd never dared to voice. Maya talked about her vision for the creative division, about the projects she wanted to pursue, and the changes she hoped to make. Lucas talked about his own ambitions at Harmon Construction, about his desire to eventually lead his own project team, maybe even start his own company someday. We could do it together, Maya said, her eyes bright with possibility. A design and construction partnership. Maya Collins and Lucas Reed, building dreams. Reed and Collins, Lucas corrected, alphabetical order. Collins Reed. It flows better. We can argue about the name later. First, we have to actually build the empire. They fell asleep somewhere around 3 in the morning, tangled together on the couch, their half-formed plans still echoing in the air around them. The rest of the Thanksgiving weekend passed in a blur of activity and connection. They explored Seattle together, the 4 of them, hitting all the tourist spots that Emma had researched. The Space Needle provided panoramic views of the city that would soon be their home. Pike Place Market offered sensory overload in the best possible way. The smell of fresh fish, the colors of flower stalls, the sounds of buskers and vendors competing for attention. I want to come here every weekend, Emma declared, clutching a paper bag of handmade chocolates she'd purchased with her own money. That might get expensive, Lucas observed. Worth it. She popped a chocolate into her mouth and sighed with exaggerated pleasure. These are transcendent. Transcendent? Maya raised an eyebrow. Where did you learn that word? I read, unlike some people. Emma shot a teasing look at Lucas. I read. Dad, you've been on the same book for 6 months. It's a long book. It's 300 pages. Maya was laughing again, that free and joyful sound that Lucas was rapidly becoming addicted to. He made a mental note to let Emma tease him more often, if only to hear that laugh. The weekend ended too soon, as weekends always do. Sunday evening found them at the airport again, roles reversed from 6 weeks before. This time it was Lucas, Emma, and his mother preparing to board a plane, while Maya stood on the other side of the security line watching them go. 2 months, Emma said, hugging Maya fiercely. That's like nothing. It'll be over before we know it. 2 months, Maya agreed, and then we'll be together for real. No more goodbyes. Lucas held her last, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, the smell of her hair, the way she fit against him like she'd been designed for that purpose. I love you, he said. I love you too. Now go, before I do something embarrassing like cry in public. You already are crying in public. Shut up. But she was laughing through the tears, and so was he. He walked away from her for the second time in 2 months, but this time was different. This time he was walking toward something, not just away. Every step took him closer to the moment when they wouldn't have to say goodbye anymore. 2 months. 60 days. It felt like an eternity and an instant all at once. But for the first time in 12 years, Lucas Reed knew exactly where he was going, and he couldn't wait to get there. The flight home felt longer than the flight out, each mile stretching the distance between Lucas and the life he was desperate to begin. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder somewhere over Montana, her face peaceful in a way that made her look younger than her 12 years. Lucas's mother dozed in the row behind them, exhausted from the weekend's activities. But Lucas couldn't sleep. His mind raced with lists and timelines, the 1,000 practical details that stood between now and the moment they could call Seattle home. He had to give notice at work, pack up an apartment's worth of memories, sell furniture they couldn't take, say goodbye to colleagues and neighbors, and the comfortable rhythms of a decade-long life. 2 months had seemed like plenty of time when he'd said it to David Harmon. Now, with the reality of everything that needed to happen, it felt impossibly short. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Already miss you. The apartment feels empty. Lucas smiled despite the ache in his chest. We'll fill it up soon. Promise. I'm holding you to that, Reed. He put the phone away and let his head fall back against the seat, watching the clouds scroll past outside the window. Somewhere below them, the country spread out in a patchwork of cities and farmland and wilderness, all the space that currently separated him from where he wanted to be. Soon, he told himself, soon. The next morning, Lucas walked into his supervisor's office and handed over his resignation letter. Tom Martinez, a grizzled veteran of the construction industry who had hired Lucas nearly a decade ago, read it in silence, his expression unreadable. Seattle, Tom said finally. Seattle. For the woman? Lucas nodded. He'd never talked much about his personal life at work, but somehow everyone always seemed to know anyway. For the woman. For my daughter. For a fresh start. Tom was quiet for a long moment, his weathered fingers tracing the edges of the letter. Then he looked up with something that might have been respect in his eyes. "I moved from Texas to be with my wife 40 years ago," he said. "Left a job I loved, a family that thought I was crazy, everything I knew. It was the best decision I ever made." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." Tom stood and extended his hand. "You've been a good worker, Reed, one of the best I've had. Seattle's lucky to get you." Lucas shook his hand, surprised by the emotion that tightened his throat. "Thanks, Tom, for everything." "Don't thank me. Just promise me you won't screw this up. Not everyone gets a second chance at the life they want." The words stayed with Lucas as he walked out of the office, carrying the weight of a decision that couldn't be undone. He wasn't just leaving a job, he was leaving behind the person he'd been for the past decade. The careful, cautious, single father who'd built walls around his heart and called it responsibility. That person was gone now, or at least he was trying to be. The weeks that followed were a blur of boxes and decisions and the strange grief of dismantling a life. Lucas hadn't realized how much he'd accumulated over the years. Not just physical possessions, but memories attached to every corner of the apartment. Emma's height marks on the doorframe of her bedroom, the stain on the living room carpet from the time she'd tried to make him breakfast in bed and dropped an entire carafe of orange juice, the window where he'd stood countless times, watching the sun set and wondering if this was all his life would ever be. Emma handled the upheaval with characteristic pragmatism, sorting her belongings into keep, donate, and trash piles with the efficiency of a seasoned organizer. "You're being sentimental again," she observed, catching Lucas staring at a box of old photographs. "I'm not being sentimental, I'm being thorough. You've been holding that picture of me at the beach for 10 minutes. Lucas looked down at the photograph in his hand. Emma at 4 years old, covered in sand and grinning at the camera with pure, uncomplicated joy. He remembered that day with painful clarity. Maya had been there, just out of frame, building sandcastles with Emma. While Lucas watched them both and pretended his heart wasn't breaking with how much he wanted this to be his real family. Now it would be. The thought still felt surreal. "Fine," he admitted. "Maybe I'm being a little sentimental." Emma crossed the room and looked at the photograph over his shoulder. "That was a good day." "It was. Maya braided my hair afterward. I remember because she did it wrong and it looked like a bird's nest, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I wore it anyway." Emma smiled at the memory. "She's gotten better at braiding since then. She's gotten better at a lot of things. So have you." Emma took the photograph from his hand and placed it carefully in the keep pile. "Come on, Dad. We've got 3 more boxes to sort before dinner." They worked in comfortable silence, father and daughter, occasionally breaking to share memories or debate the fate of particular items. It was, Lucas realized, one of the last times they would do this in this apartment. Sit together in familiar space, surrounded by the artifacts of their shared history. He tried not to be sad about it. He tried to focus on what they were moving toward, not what they were leaving behind. But late that night, after Emma had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, Lucas sat alone in the living room and let himself feel the weight of the transition. 12 years. He'd been a single father for 12 years in this city, in this apartment, building a life that revolved entirely around his daughter and his work. It had been enough. It had been more than enough, really. Emma had grown into an extraordinary person, and Lucas had found satisfaction in watching her flourish. But it hadn't been complete. There had always been something missing, a gap shaped exactly like the woman who was now waiting for him 2,000 miles away. His phone rang, Maya's face appearing on the screen like an answer to an unspoken prayer. "Hey," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Hey yourself, you sound tired." "Long day of packing. How's it going?" "Slower than I'd like. Emma is incredibly efficient, which makes me look bad by comparison." Maya laughed, the sound warming something in Lucas's chest. "She's always been the organized one in your family." "She gets it from her grandmother, certainly not from me." They talked for an hour, maybe more, about the move and work and the small details of their days that somehow felt profound when shared with each other. Maya told him about her first week as senior partner, the challenges and triumphs of leading a creative team, Lucas told her about Tom's unexpected blessing, about the coworkers who'd organized a farewell lunch despite his protests. "They're going to miss you," Maya said. "I'll miss them too, but not enough to stay." "Good answer. I've been practicing." The conversation wound down eventually, as conversations do, but neither of them seemed willing to hang up. Lucas lay on his back on the couch, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to Maya breathe. "6 more weeks," she said softly. "6 more weeks. I've been counting the days. I have one of those paper chains Emma made me, and I tear off a link every morning." "That's adorable. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." Lucas smiled into the darkness. "Your secret's safe with me." "It better be." Maya paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted to something more serious. "Lucas, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you scared about all of this?" He considered the question, turning it over in his mind like a stone in his palm. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Everything. That I'm making the wrong choice. That I'm disrupting Emma's life for selfish reasons. That once we're actually living together, you'll realize I'm not what you wanted after all." The words came out in a rush, fears he hadn't even fully acknowledged to himself until now. Maya was quiet for a moment. "I'm scared too," she said finally. "I'm scared that I won't be good enough. That I don't know how to be a mother or a partner or any of the things I'm supposed to be. I'm scared that I'll let you both down." "You could never let us down." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Lucas sat up, suddenly needing to say this clearly. "Maya, I've known you for over 20 years. I've seen you at your best and your worst. I've watched you fail and get back up and keep fighting. And through all of it, through everything, you have never once let me down. Not once." "Lucas, I'm not finished. You're the bravest person I know. You took a chance on a job across the country, alone, with nothing but your talent and your determination. You told me you loved me even though you had no idea how I felt. You're building a life for us, a home for us, while we're still stuck here sorting through boxes and saying goodbye." His voice cracked slightly. "You're not going to let anyone down. You're going to be amazing. You already are." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Lucas began to worry he'd said too much. Then he heard Maya crying, soft, quiet sobs that made his heart ache with the need to hold her. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "Soon. I promise." "I know. I'm tired of waiting. I've been waiting for 12 years, and I thought once we finally figured this out, the waiting would be over. But it's not. There's always more waiting." 6 more weeks, Lucas said, and then no more waiting, ever. They stayed on the phone until Maya fell asleep, her breathing evening out into the slow rhythm of slumber. Lucas listened for a while longer, not wanting to break the connection, then finally whispered a goodnight and ended the call. He sat in the darkness of the apartment, surrounded by the half-packed evidence of a life in transition, and let himself feel the full weight of love and fear and hope that had been building in his chest for longer than he could remember. 6 more weeks. He could do this. He had to. Christmas arrived like an unwelcome interruption, demanding attention and celebration at the worst possible time. Lucas had always loved the holidays, the lights, the music, the way Emma's face lit up on Christmas morning, but this year everything felt tinged with urgency. Every day spent celebrating was a day not spent packing, not spent preparing, not spent moving closer to Maya. Still, he couldn't deny Emma the joy of a proper Christmas. They decorated their small tree together, hanging ornaments that carried a decade's worth of memories. They baked cookies, badly, but with enthusiasm, and delivered them to neighbors they would soon be leaving behind. They watched terrible holiday movies and drank hot chocolate, and tried to pretend that everything wasn't about to change. Maya flew in on Christmas Eve, a surprise that had taken weeks to coordinate. Emma had been in on the planning, which explained her barely contained excitement when Lucas picked her up from her robotics club meeting. "You're acting weird," Lucas observed as they drove home. "I'm not acting weird. I'm acting normal." "That is definitely not your normal face." "It's my festive face. It's Christmas Eve. I'm being festive." You hate being festive. You once told me that holiday cheer was a conspiracy by greeting card companies. I've evolved. People can evolve, Dad. Lucas was still puzzling over his daughter's strange mood when they arrived at the apartment to find Maya sitting on their front steps, a suitcase beside her, and a red bow stuck absurdly on top of her head. "Surprise," she said, grinning at Lucas's stunned expression. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stand there on the sidewalk, staring at the woman he loved like she was a mirage that might disappear if he blinked. "Dad?" Emma nudged him with her elbow. "Say something. You're being weird." "You're here," Lucas managed. "I'm here." Maya stood up, brushing snow off her coat. "I couldn't let you spend Christmas without me. Not this year. Not when it's the last one before we're finally together for good." Lucas crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. She was cold from sitting outside, her nose red and her cheeks wind-chapped, but she felt like summer. "You came," he said into her hair. "Of course I came. I'll always come." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with emotion. "Merry Christmas, Lucas." "Merry Christmas, Maya." They spent Christmas Eve crammed together in the apartment, 3 people in a space that suddenly felt too small and just right all at once. Maya had brought gifts, carefully wrapped packages that she distributed with barely contained excitement. A new sketch pad for Emma, filled with high-quality paper that made her gasp with appreciation. A first-edition copy of Lucas's favorite book, one he'd mentioned wanting years ago and had completely forgotten about. "How did you remember this?" he asked, turning the worn cover over in his hands. "I remember everything you've ever told me. I just didn't always know what to do with it." Emma gave them both matching scarves she'd knitted herself, lumpy, uneven things in clashing colors that were somehow perfect in their imperfection. "I learned from YouTube videos," she explained as they wrapped the scarves around their necks. "It's harder than it looks." "It's beautiful," Maya said, and meant it. They went to midnight mass together, not because any of them were particularly religious, but because it had been a tradition when Lucas was a child, and he wanted to share it with the people he loved. They sat in a pew near the back, Emma between them, the candle glow soft on their faces as the choir sang hymns that spoke of hope and renewal. Afterward, walking back to the apartment through streets made quiet by snow, Maya slipped her hand into Lucas's and leaned her head against his shoulder. "This is perfect," she whispered. "It's cold and late, and we're all exhausted. Exactly perfect." He laughed, pulling her closer. Behind them, Emma was trying to catch snowflakes on her tongue, her earlier teenage coolness abandoned in favor of childlike wonder. "Next year, we'll be doing this in Seattle," Lucas said. "Next year and every year after that." The thought settled into him like a promise, warm despite the winter chill. Every year after that. A lifetime of Christmases, of midnights and snowflakes, and this small, perfect family. It was more than he'd ever dared to hope for. Christmas morning dawned gray and cold, but inside the apartment everything was warmth. They opened presents in their pajamas, drank too much coffee, and ate the cinnamon rolls Emma had learned to make from Lucas's mother. Maya fit into their traditions like she'd always been there, which Lucas realized she had been, just not in this way, not so completely. "I have one more gift for you," Maya said as the morning wound toward afternoon. She was looking at Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. Nervous, maybe, or excited. "You've already given me too much. This one's different." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, handing it to him with hands that trembled slightly. Lucas opened it carefully, not sure what to expect. Inside was a single sheet of paper, official-looking and dense with legal text. He read it twice before the words made sense. "This is a lease agreement," Maya finished, "for a bigger apartment. In Seattle, 4 bedrooms instead of 3. Because I was thinking—" She stopped, took a breath. "I was thinking that maybe, someday, our family might get bigger. And I wanted to be ready." Lucas stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Maya, I'm not saying we have to decide anything now. I'm not trying to pressure you. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about the future, our future, all of it." She met his eyes, vulnerable and brave all at once. "I want everything with you, Lucas. Kids, if you want them. A house someday, growing old together. I want all of it. Emma, who had been pretending very hard not to listen, made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a squeal. Lucas set the paper aside and took Maya's hands in his. I want that too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I want everything. With you. Maya's smile was sunrise breaking through storm clouds. She kissed him, right there in front of Emma, who groaned dramatically but was grinning when they pulled apart. Does this mean I'm getting siblings? Emma asked. Eventually, Maya said. Maybe, if everyone agrees. I agree. Emma's voice was immediately emphatic. I've always wanted siblings. I have so much wisdom to share. Wisdom about what? Lucas asked skeptically. About everything. Surviving Dad's cooking, navigating his moods, important life skills. My cooking is fine. Your cooking is survival-focused at best. Maya was laughing again, that bright, free sound that Lucas was learning to associate with home. He pulled both of them close, his daughter and the woman he loved, and held on tight. This was his family, imperfect and complicated and beautiful beyond measure, and in just a few more weeks, they would finally be together for good. The days after Christmas blurred together in a frenzy of final preparations. Maya stayed through New Year's, helping them pack the last of the boxes and coordinating the logistics of the move. She was in her element, organized and decisive and impossibly competent, and Lucas was happy to let her take the lead. The moving truck will arrive on January 15th, she announced, consulting the color-coded spreadsheet she'd created. That gives you 2 weeks to finish packing and handle any last-minute details. Yes, ma'am, Lucas said, only half joking. The apartment in Seattle will be ready the same day. I've arranged for the furniture we're keeping to be delivered directly there. The new beds are already in place. I notice you said beds, plural, Emma observed. Does that mean I'm not sharing with anyone? You have your own room, complete with the desk positioning you specified. Excellent. What about wall color? Calm competence blue, as requested. Emma nodded with satisfaction. You're very good at this. I've been planning this moment for 12 years. I've had time to prepare. New Year's Eve found them on the roof of Lucas's apartment building, wrapped in blankets and watching the distant fireworks paint the sky. It was cold, too cold probably for sensible people to be sitting outside, but none of them wanted to be anywhere else. One more year, Maya said as midnight approached, and then everything changes. Everything's already changed, Lucas replied. The rest is just geography. She smiled at him, her face illuminated by the colored lights exploding overhead. When did you become such a romantic? Around the time I stopped being a coward. The countdown began somewhere in the city below them, thousands of voices rising in anticipation. Lucas pulled Maya close, feeling Emma press against his other side. 10, 9, 8. I love you, Maya whispered. 7, 6, 5. I love you too, Lucas replied. 4, 3, 2. Emma grabbed both their hands. 1. Happy New Year. The sky exploded with light and color, and the sound of a city celebrating new beginnings. Lucas kissed Maya as the fireworks burst overhead, tasting champagne and promise on her lips. A new year, a new life, a new chance at happiness. He was ready. January 15th arrived faster than seemed possible. Lucas stood in the doorway of the empty apartment, looking at the rooms that had been his home for nearly a decade. Without the furniture and photographs and accumulated clutter of daily life, the space looked smaller than he remembered. Anonymous. Like it had already forgotten him. You ready? Emma asked from behind him. She was carrying her robot prototype carefully in both arms, unwilling to trust it to the moving truck. Yeah. Lucas took one last look around, then stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind him. Let's go home. The drive to the airport felt surreal, familiar streets made strange by the knowledge that he was seeing them for the last time as a resident, not a visitor. Emma chattered nervously beside him, her excitement manifesting as an endless stream of questions about Seattle and their new life. Do you think we'll be able to see the Space Needle from the apartment? Maya says on clear days, yes, son. What about mountains? Are there mountains? Mount Rainier, on really clear days. This is going to be amazing. I can feel it. Emma bounced in her seat. I've never lived anywhere else, Dad. My whole life has been this one city, and now we're just starting over, somewhere completely new. Scared? Lucas asked. A little, but mostly excited. She glanced at him. Are you scared? He considered the question as he had before, when Maya had asked him the same thing. The fear was still there, would probably always be there in some form, but it had been joined by something stronger, something brighter. A little, he admitted, but mostly excited. Emma grinned. Good answer. The flight was smooth, the hours passing in a blur of anticipation and nervous energy. Lucas tried to read, tried to sleep, but his mind kept drifting to what waited on the other end. Maya and the apartment and the life they were finally about to begin. When the plane touched down in Seattle, he felt something shift in his chest. A settling, maybe, or a release. He was home. Maya was waiting at the arrivals gate, holding a sign that said, "The Reed family, finally home," in glittery letters that had clearly been decorated by someone with access to craft supplies and too much enthusiasm. Emma spotted her first, letting out a shriek that turned heads throughout the terminal. She sprinted toward Maya. Phoenix, the robot, clutched precariously under one arm and threw herself into an embrace that nearly knocked them both over. Lucas followed at a more measured pace, savoring the moment. The crowds parted around him, busy travelers with their own destinations and dramas. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was the woman at the end of the hall, the daughter in her arms, the future waiting to unfold. He reached them and joined the embrace, three people holding on to each other in the middle of an airport, drawing curious looks and not caring at all. "Welcome home," Maya whispered. Lucas closed his eyes and let the words sink into his bones. Home. After 12 years of wanting and waiting and being afraid, he was finally home. The drive from the airport to their new apartment felt like traveling through a dream. Seattle spread out around them, gray and green and glistening with the remnants of recent rain, a city that would become the backdrop of their new lives. Lucas sat in the passenger seat of Maya's car, his hand resting on her thigh, watching the unfamiliar streets roll past with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. Emma had commandeered the back seat, her face pressed against the window as she catalogued every detail. "There's the Space Needle. And is that the water? Dad, I can see the water from here." "Puget Sound," Maya supplied. "We'll take the ferry to Bainbridge Island sometime. You can see orcas if you're lucky." "Orcas? Like actual killer whales?" "Actual killer whales. They migrate through here." Emma's excitement was palpable, filling the car with an energy that made Lucas smile despite his exhaustion. She had left behind her friends, her school, everything she'd known for her entire 12 years of life. And here she was, bubbling with enthusiasm about killer whales and ferry rides, ready to embrace whatever came next. He'd raised a remarkable kid. He couldn't take all the credit. Maya had been there too, shaping Emma in ways both of them were only now beginning to acknowledge, but still remarkable. The apartment building rose before them, a modern structure of glass and steel that looked nothing like the weathered brick of their old home. Maya pulled into an underground parking garage, navigating to a spot marked with their unit number, and killed the engine. "Ready?" she asked. Lucas looked at her, this woman who had waited for him, believed in him, built a home for them while he was still learning to let go of his fears, and felt his heart swell with an emotion too big for words. "Ready," he said. They took the elevator to the 7th floor, Emma bouncing impatiently the entire ride. When Maya unlocked the door and pushed it open, Lucas heard his daughter's sharp intake of breath. The apartment was beautiful, more than beautiful. It was a home, already furnished and decorated with the careful attention Maya brought to everything she did. Soft light filtered through large windows, illuminating hardwood floors and comfortable furniture arranged in welcoming configurations. The walls held artwork that blended Maya's modern taste with touches that spoke of their shared history. A photograph from Emma's robotics competition, a print of the Seattle skyline, a framed copy of a letter Lucas had written Maya years ago that he hadn't even known she'd kept. "You did all this?" Lucas asked, his voice rough. "I wanted it to feel like home when you got here, not like a hotel or a temporary space. Home." Maya's voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Is it okay? If you hate anything, we can change it. I just thought... He cut her off with a kiss, long and deep and full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, Maya's eyes were bright with tears. I'll take that as approval, she whispered. Emma had already disappeared down the hallway, and they heard her exclaim of delight when she found her room. Lucas and Maya followed, finding her standing in the center of a space that had been transformed into a perfect sanctuary for a 12-year-old robotics enthusiast. The walls were the promised shade of calm competence blue. The desk sat exactly where Emma had specified, beneath a window that looked out over the city. Shelves lined one wall, already populated with books on engineering and science that Maya must have selected with care. This is incredible, Emma breathed. This is the best room I've ever had. You've only had one other room, Lucas pointed out, and this one is better, by a lot. She turned to Maya with shining eyes. Thank you for all of this. Maya opened her arms, and Emma stepped into the embrace without hesitation. Lucas watched them hold each other, his daughter and the woman who had loved her since before she could form memories, and felt something ancient and heavy finally release from his chest. They were home. They were together. And after 12 years of fear and longing and missed opportunities, they were finally exactly where they belonged. The first weeks in Seattle passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Lucas started his new job at Harmon Construction, learning the rhythms of a different workplace while proving himself to colleagues who didn't know his history or his capabilities. The work was similar enough to feel familiar, but different enough to challenge him, and he found himself energized in ways he hadn't been in years. Emma began at her new school, navigating the complex social terrain of middle school with the same determination she brought to everything. She came home with stories of demanding teachers and potential friends, of robotics clubs that met on different days than she was used to, and cafeteria food that was surprisingly superior to her old school's offerings. There's a girl named Priya who builds drones, she reported at dinner one night. Actual drones that can carry packages. She says she'll teach me if I help her with the programming. That sounds like a fair trade, Maya said, passing the salad. How's the rest of it going? The social stuff? Emma shrugged with studied nonchalance. Fine. Some kids are nice, some are less nice. Pretty standard. Anyone giving you trouble? Nothing I can't handle. She stabbed a piece of chicken with her fork. There's this one guy, Tyler, who thinks he's hilarious but is actually just annoying. He keeps calling me new girl like it's an insult. Want me to talk to someone, like Lucas asked, his protective instincts flaring. Dad, no, that would make it worse. Emma rolled her eyes with practiced expertise. I've got it under control. Priya says he used to bother her too until she programmed one of her drones to follow him around making fart noises. Maya choked on her water. She did what? It was allegedly an accident, a malfunction in the audio system. Emma's grin suggested she admired the ingenuity. He leaves her alone now. Lucas exchanged a look with Maya that conveyed both amusement and concern. Their daughter was adapting, finding her tribe, learning to navigate challenges with creativity and resilience. It was everything he'd hoped for when he'd made the terrifying decision to uproot their lives. But it was Maya who was thriving most visibly in this new chapter. Her role as senior partner at Morrison & Blake suited her perfectly, giving her the creative freedom and leadership opportunities she'd always deserved. She came home most nights full of energy, bursting with ideas and stories about her team's projects. We're pitching for the waterfront development, she told Lucas one evening as they sat together on the balcony, the city lights glittering below them. It's the biggest project the firm has ever pursued. If we get it, it'll change everything. You'll get it, Lucas said with complete confidence. You don't know that. I know you. I know what you're capable of when you want something. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. You're going to crush this. What if I don't? What if they pick someone else and I have to go back to my team and tell them we failed? Then you'll learn from it and do better next time. That's what you always do. Lucas turned her face toward him, making sure she could see the certainty in his eyes. Maya, you've never let failure stop you from anything. You're not going to start now. She studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. When did you become my biggest cheerleader? I've always been your biggest cheerleader. I was just too scared to let you see it. The kiss she gave him was soft and sweet and full of gratitude. They sat together in comfortable silence as the evening deepened around them, two people who had finally learned to lean on each other instead of standing alone. Spring arrived in Seattle with an explosion of color and renewal. Cherry blossoms lined the streets, their delicate pink petals drifting like snow on the breeze. The gray winter skies gave way to brilliant blue, and the city seemed to shake off its seasonal gloom and embrace the warmth. For Lucas, the season brought unexpected challenges. A major project at Harmon Construction hit complications, supply chain issues, permit delays, the kind of setbacks that turned straightforward jobs into marathon exercises in problem solving. He found himself working longer hours, coming home exhausted and distracted, his mind still churning with logistics, even as he tried to be present for his family. It was Emma who called him out on it first. "You're not listening," she said one evening at dinner, her voice sharp with frustration. Lucas blinked, pulling himself back from thoughts of concrete deliveries and inspection schedules. "What?" "I'm listening." "You're not. I just told you I got accepted to the regional robotics competition, and you didn't even react." Wait, what?" The words finally penetrated his distraction. "Emma, that's amazing. Regionals already? Don't." She pushed back from the table, her face tight with hurt. "Don't pretend you care now. You've been checked out for weeks." "Emma, I'm going to my room." She was gone before he could respond, leaving Lucas sitting in stunned silence. Maya reached over to touch his hand, her expression sympathetic but honest. "She's not wrong," Maya said gently. "You have been distracted. Work has been... I know, and I understand, but Lucas, she needs you. We both do. And lately, it feels like you're here, but not really here." The words hit him like a bucket of cold water. He thought about the past few weeks, the dinners where he'd been physically present but mentally elsewhere, the conversations he'd half heard, the moments he'd missed because his mind was stuck at the construction site. He'd done it again. He'd let fear and stress pull him away from the people who mattered most. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her." Lucas found Emma in her room, sitting at her desk with her back to the door. She didn't turn around when he knocked, but she didn't tell him to go away either, which he took as permission to enter. "Can we talk?" he asked. "You're busy. It's fine." "It's not fine. And I'm never too busy for you." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, putting himself at her eye level. "Emma, I'm sorry. You're right. I've been distracted and absent, and that's not fair to you." She still wouldn't look at him. "You promised things would be different here. You said we moved to Seattle so we could be a real family, but you're doing the same thing you always did, disappearing into work and leaving me to figure things out alone." The accusation cut deep because it was true. Lucas had spent so many years using work as a shield, a way to avoid the emotional messiness of life. He'd promised himself he would change, but old habits died hard. "You're right," he said. "I did promise that, and I haven't been keeping that promise. I got scared." That made her look at him. Scared of what? Of failing. Of not being good enough at this new job, this new life. Of proving that the people who thought I was crazy to move here were right. He took a breath. "When I get scared, I work harder. It's the only way I know how to deal with things. But that's not an excuse, and it's not fair to you." Emma's expression softened slightly. "I get scared too, you know. This whole thing, new city, new school, new everything, it's a lot. And when you're not really here, it feels like I'm doing it alone." "You're not alone. You've never been alone." Lucas reached for her hand, relieved when she let him take it. "I'm going to do better. I promise. And this time, I mean it." "How do I know you won't just break that promise like the last one?" It was a fair question, and Lucas didn't have a perfect answer, but he tried. "Because I've already lost 12 years to being afraid. I'm not going to lose anymore. You and Maya are the most important things in my life, and I need to act like it." He squeezed her hand. "Tell me about regionals. I want to hear everything." Emma studied him for a moment, assessing his sincerity. Then, slowly, a smile crept across her face. "We qualified with the second highest score in the district," she said. "Priya and I are going to be partners for the competition." Her drones and my programming were going to be unstoppable. That sounds terrifying for your opponents. It should be. We're very intimidating. Lucas laughed, pulling her into a hug that she only pretended to resist. I'm proud of you, Emma. I'm always proud of you, even when I'm too stupid to show it. You're not stupid, just emotionally constipated. Did Maya teach you that phrase? She might have mentioned it once or twice. They stayed like that for a while, father and daughter, rebuilding the connection that had been strained by his distraction. When Lucas finally left her room, he found Maya waiting in the hallway, her expression a mixture of relief and love. Better? She asked. Better. But I owe you an apology too. You can make it up to me later. She slipped her hand into his. Right now, I think we should order pizza and watch a terrible movie. Family bonding through shared bad taste. That sounds perfect. And it was. Summer brought the regional robotics competition, held in a cavernous convention center that buzzed with the energy of hundreds of young engineers and their creations. Lucas and Maya arrived early, staking out prime viewing positions in the crowded stands. Emma was a bundle of focused intensity, her attention completely fixed on Phoenix and the series of challenges ahead. Priya stood beside her, equally determined, their drones and robots arranged in careful formation on their team's table. Nervous? Lucas asked during a break in the competition. Terrified, Emma admitted. But like, the good kind of terrified, the kind that makes you sharper. You're going to do great. I know. She grinned at him, then turned serious. Dad, thanks for being here. I know you had to take time off work and it's a big deal, and thanks. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, Lucas said, and meant every word. The competition was grueling, testing the young engineer's skills across multiple categories. Emma and Priya worked in perfect synchronization, their combined expertise covering for each other's weaknesses. Phoenix performed flawlessly, navigating obstacles and completing tasks with mechanical precision. When the final scores were announced, Lucas felt his heart stop. Second place. Not the victory they'd hoped for, but an incredible achievement nonetheless. Emma's face was a complex mixture of pride and disappointment as she accepted the silver trophy, Priya beaming beside her. We were so close, Emma said later, examining the trophy with critical eyes. One more point, and we would have won. You'll get them next year, Maya said. Next year, we're going to destroy them. Priya's already planning upgrades. Lucas watched his daughter strategize about future competitions. Surrounded by new friends who shared her passions and felt a swell of gratitude so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. This was why they'd moved. This was what he'd been so afraid of losing by taking the risk. Emma was flourishing. They all were. The first anniversary of their move crept up quietly, marked not with grand celebrations, but with the small recognitions of a life well lived. 1 year since Lucas had walked away from everything he knew to build something new. 1 year since their small family had officially become whole, Maya planned a simple dinner at home. Their home. The apartment that had become filled with memories and inside jokes and the accumulated evidence of love made tangible. Emma helped with the cooking, her skills having improved dramatically under Maya's patient instruction. 1 year, Maya said as they sat down to eat. Can you believe it? It feels like longer, Lucas admitted. In a good way, like this has always been our life. Because it has been, Emma said. You two were just too dense to figure it out sooner. Respectful, Lucas observed dryly. Accurate. Emma grinned at them both. But I forgive you. You got there eventually. After dinner, they gathered on the balcony, their Thursday night tradition transported across the country but essentially unchanged. The Seattle skyline glittered before them, a reminder of how far they'd come and how much they'd gained. I want to ask you something, Maya said, breaking a comfortable silence. Lucas turned to look at her, noting the nervousness in her expression. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The opposite, actually. She took a breath, visibly steeling herself. I've been thinking about our future, about what comes next. Okay, when we first got together, I told you I wanted everything. Kids, a house, growing old together. Maya's eyes found his, steady and sure. I meant it then, and I mean it now. But I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to put things off because we're scared or because the timing isn't perfect. We've already wasted 12 years. I don't want to waste any more. Lucas's heart was pounding. What are you saying? Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. When she opened it, a simple gold band glinted in the evening light. I'm saying I want to marry you, Lucas Reed. I want to make this official. I want to stand up in front of everyone we love and promise to spend the rest of my life being your partner, your best friend, your family. Tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. Will you marry me? Emma made a noise that was somewhere between a gasp and a squeal. Lucas couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at the ring and the woman holding it and the impossible, miraculous reality of this moment. Lucas? Maya's voice wavered slightly. Say something. Yes, he managed. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Maya's smile was brighter than the city lights as she slipped the ring onto his finger. Emma launched herself at them both, nearly knocking them off their chairs in her enthusiasm. Finally, Emma declared, her face pressed between theirs. I've been waiting for this forever. You knew? Lucas asked. She asked my permission last week. I told her if she didn't propose soon, I was going to do it for her. Maya laughed through her tears. She also helped me pick out the ring. I have excellent taste, Emma said modestly. Lucas looked at them, his daughter and his soon-to-be wife, the two people who had given his life meaning and purpose and joy, and felt the last remnants of his old fears dissolve into nothing. He had spent 12 years being afraid of rejection, of change, of wanting something and losing it. He had built walls around his heart and convinced himself it was strength when it was really just fear wearing a different mask. But he wasn't afraid anymore. How could he be when everything he'd ever wanted was right here in his arms? They were married in October, on a crisp autumn day that painted Seattle in shades of gold and amber. The ceremony was small, just close friends and family gathered in a garden overlooking the Sound, but it felt enormous in its significance. Lucas's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Emma served as both maid of honor and best man, a role she'd insisted on and executed with characteristic determination. Maya wore a simple white dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of one of Lucas's dreams. And Lucas stood at the altar and watched the woman he'd loved for over 2 decades walk toward him, and wondered how he'd ever convinced himself that a life without her was acceptable. I, Maya Collins, take you, Lucas Reed, she said, her voice clear and strong, to be my husband, to love and cherish in good times and in hard times for the rest of my days. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, and your home, no matter where life takes us. I, Lucas Reed, take you, Maya Collins, Lucas replied, his voice cracking with emotion, to be my wife, to love and support through every challenge and every triumph for as long as I live. I promise to never again let fear keep me from the person I love. I promise to show up every day and be the partner you deserve. Emma read a poem she'd written herself about love and patience and the courage it takes to reach for happiness. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared. You may kiss the bride. Lucas pulled Maya into his arms and kissed her as the small crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Against his lips, she was laughing and crying at the same time. We did it, she whispered. We did it, he agreed. Only took us 20 years. Better late than never. I love you, Mrs. Reed. I love you too, Mr. Reed. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. Now let's go start the rest of our lives. The reception was held at the apartment, their home filled with people they loved and food Maya had insisted on catering from Thai Palace. Emma danced with her grandmother, with Priya, with anyone who would stand still long enough to be conscripted. Lucas and Maya barely left each other's sides, unable to stop touching, unable to stop smiling. As the evening wound down and the guests began to depart, Lucas found himself on the balcony, looking out at the city that had become his home. Maya joined him, slipping her hand into his. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything. Nothing. How different my life would be if I'd told you how I felt 12 years ago. Do you regret the wait? Lucas considered the question. The years of loneliness, the missed opportunities, the ache of loving someone from a distance. It would be easy to wish it had happened differently. But then he thought about Emma, about the person she'd become during those years of watching and waiting. He thought about his own growth, the hard lessons he'd learned about fear and courage and the price of silence. He thought about all the ways that struggle had shaped them, prepared them, made them ready for this moment. "No," he said finally. "I think we got here exactly when we were supposed to." Maya leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think so too." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Seattle twinkle against the darkness. Somewhere inside, Emma was laughing at something her grandmother said. The apartment hummed with the residual energy of celebration. "So what now?" Maya asked. "Now we live," Lucas said simply. "Together, as a family, for the rest of our lives." "That sounds perfect." "It really does." 2 years later, they welcomed a son, a red-faced, squalling bundle of fury and wonder that changed everything and nothing all at once. Emma, now 14, held her baby brother with the careful intensity of someone handling a precious and volatile science experiment. "He's so small," she said, awe in her voice. "You were smaller," Lucas told her, "and louder." "I find that hard to believe." Maya, exhausted but radiant, watched them from the hospital bed. "He has your eyes, Lucas, and your stubborn chin." "I don't have a stubborn chin." "You absolutely have a stubborn chin. It's one of my favorite things about you." They named him Daniel, after Lucas's father, the man who had moved across the country for love all those decades ago and never looked back. It felt right, this bridge between past and future, between the family that had shaped them and the family they were building. The adjustment to life with a newborn was chaotic and exhausting and utterly transformative. Lucas found himself falling in love all over again, with Maya, with Emma, with this tiny new person who demanded everything and gave even more in return. "I didn't think I could be any happier than I was," he confessed to Maya one night, Daniel asleep on his chest. "But this is something else entirely." "It's terrifying is what it is," Maya said. "He's so fragile. What if we break him?" "We won't break him. We have Emma to keep us in line." As if summoned, their daughter appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her school uniform. "The baby monitor was making weird noises again. I fixed it." "You fixed the baby monitor at 6 in the morning?" "It was beeping. I couldn't sleep." She crossed to peer at Daniel, her expression softening. "He's still ridiculously cute." "You were ridiculously cute too," Lucas said. "I'm still ridiculously cute. It's a family trait." She kissed her brother's forehead, then headed for the door. "I'm making breakfast. Try to be functional humans by the time it's ready." Maya laughed, watching her go. "We raised a good one." "We did. And we're going to raise another good one." Lucas looked down at Daniel, at this miraculous new life they'd created together. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Better than okay." Maya leaned over to kiss him, soft and certain. "We're going to be extraordinary." The years that followed proved her right. Daniel grew from a demanding infant into a curious toddler, then an adventurous child who worshipped his big sister and demanded stories from his father every night. Emma graduated high school as valedictorian, delivering a speech about family and courage that had both Lucas and Maya sobbing in the audience. She went on to MIT, her father's joy at the acceptance letter only slightly dampened by the knowledge that she'd be 3,000 miles away. Maya's career continued to soar. The waterfront development project was completed to universal acclaim, and Morrison & Blake became one of the most respected design firms on the West Coast. She was offered partnerships at larger firms, opportunities that would have seemed impossible just a decade before. She turned them all down. "I have everything I need," she told Lucas when he asked about one particularly lucrative offer. "Money is nice, prestige is nice, but none of it means anything without this, without you and Emma and Daniel, without our life." Lucas understood exactly what she meant. His own career had stabilized into something sustainable, challenging enough to be engaging, but never so consuming that it pulled him away from what mattered. He'd learned, finally, the lesson it had taken him so long to grasp, that work was important, but it would never be the most important thing. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the garden where they'd exchanged vows. The seasons had changed, spring instead of autumn, but the location held the same magic it always had. Emma came from Boston, surprising them with her arrival the night before. Daniel, now 8 years old, had written them a card filled with crooked letters and sincere declarations of love. Lucas's mother, frailer now but still sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, presided over the celebration with the satisfied air of someone who had known all along how things would turn out. "I told you," she said to Lucas as they watched Maya laugh at something Daniel had said. "I told you she was the one." "You did." "And did you listen?" "Eventually." His mother shook her head with fond exasperation. "Eventually. You're lucky she waited." "I know." Lucas watched his wife, his partner, his best friend, the woman who had been patient enough to wait for him to grow up and brave enough to tell him the truth when it mattered. "I'm the luckiest man alive." That night, after the guests had gone, and Daniel had been put to bed, and Emma had retreated to her childhood room with the same protests about being too old for tucking in that she'd been making since she was 12, Lucas and Maya sat together on their balcony. It was their spot, their tradition. 20 years of Thursday nights, through all the changes and challenges and triumphs, they had always found their way back here, to this quiet space where they could be just themselves without pretense or protection. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't moved to Seattle?" Maya asked. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it." "Why not?" Lucas considered the question. The weight of the past had lessened over the years, but it never quite disappeared. Those 12 years of silence still haunted him occasionally, rising up in quiet moments to remind him how close he'd come to missing everything. "Because it doesn't matter," he said finally. "What matters is that we're here now, that we found our way to each other despite all the detours and delays, that we built this life together." He turned to look at her, this woman who had been the axis of his heart for as long as he could remember. "I spent so long being afraid of losing you that I almost lost you for real. But I didn't. And every day since then has been a gift I'm determined not to waste." Maya's eyes glistened in the darkness. "When did you become such a poet?" "I've always been a poet. I just didn't have the courage to say the words out loud." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, a kiss that carried 2 decades of history and promised many more to come. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "I love you, Lucas Reed." "I love you too, Maya Reed." They sat together as the city settled into sleep around them, their hands intertwined, their hearts full. The road to this moment had been longer and harder than either of them would have chosen, but they had walked it together, and that made all the difference. Because sometimes the reason a single dad stays alone isn't lack of love. It's loving one person so deeply that nothing else ever stood a chance. And when that person finally knows the truth, when two hearts that have been orbiting each other for years finally collide, the universe shifts to make room for them. Lucas Reed had spent 12 years being afraid, 12 years of silence and longing and carefully constructed walls. But on that Thursday night, when Maya had asked him why he didn't have a girlfriend, everything had changed. The question had unlocked something he'd been hiding for half his life, and the answer had led him here. To this balcony, this city, this family, this love. He wouldn't trade a single moment of it, not the pain or the waiting or the fear, because all of it, every difficult step of the journey, had brought him home. And home, he had learned, wasn't a place. It was the people who loved you back.